Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 76: Hong Zengwen and his son. Bang! Just then, a shattering sound suddenly came from the side. Liang Yue turned his head and saw that the shop door had been kicked open from the outside, and then two figures, one large and one small, slowly walked in from the outside. This was obviously a father and son. The adult was wearing an old moon-white robe, with a stern face, and his appearance was 7 or 8 parts similar to that of the Kung Fu Emperor Jet Li. With very sharp eyes, even with half a bald head, he still looked heroic and had the air of a great hero. The child looked only about 8 or 9 years old, but the expression on his face was exactly the same as that of the adult beside him, both cold and unapproachable. Seeing these two suddenly barging in, Liang Yue's eyes lit up. If he guessed correctly, the identities of these two people should be the absolute protagonists of this new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world, Hong Zengwen and Hong Wending. According to the development trajectory of the plot, this father and son will almost certainly come to Ma Village, but Liang Yue did not expect that the opportunity to meet them would come so quickly. Why did you hurt people? Looking at Liang Yue holding a straight saber, Hong Zengwen was stunned for a moment, but then quickly returned to normal, squinting his eyes and looking at him, and asked in a cold voice. Obviously, with Liang Yue's current 16-year-old appearance, Jet Li, who had experienced many Jianghu affairs, could naturally tell at a glance that this guy seemed to be a fledgling novice. In fact, it was not only Hong Zengwen, but even the squinting-eyed shop assistant who had just had his tongue cut off by someone, obviously saw it, which is why the scene of the shopkeeper overcharging him earlier occurred. They wanted to rely on their advantage as a local bully, with many people, and the relationship with the local government, to embezzle his 2 gold bars. It's just that the shopkeeper obviously didn't expect that. Although Liang Yue looked a bit tender, he was actually a tough guy. They wanted to embezzle my silver and also planned to collude with the government to send me to prison. Is that a good enough reason? Liang Yue heard this. The corner of his mouth slightly curved, and said to the father and son in front of him, "You acted a little too hard." After hearing Liang Yue's words, Hong Zengwen subconsciously looked again at the 4 people who were rolling on the ground, and the shop assistant with the cut mouth, which was considered to be tacitly acknowledging that he was on the side of justice. Farewell. Hong Zengwen's style of doing things was obviously very straightforward. Seeing that he didn't need to act chivalrously, he nodded to him and directly turned around and left with his son. Then, "See you again if fate allows." He cupped his fists at the father and son. Only after they walked out of the shop did Liang Yue turn his head again and continue to look at the squinting eyes in front of him, who was distraught and wanted to pretend to be crazy to delay time. Thanks to the shop assistant's loud shouts earlier, not only did Hong Zengwen and his son notice the situation of the gold shop and broke in through the door at the first time. At this moment, outside the shop door, a group of people and neighbors also discovered the inappropriateness here, and they all gathered there to watch the excitement. Pointing at the gold shop, some of the bolder ones even peeked inside, grabbing the door frame. Under this circumstance, the government constables who maintained law and order in the town would probably arrive soon, so hurry up a bit. If you don't want to lose anything else, quickly take me to get the silver. As he spoke, Liang Yue had already placed the straight saber in his hand on the squinting eye's neck. The sharp and cold edge of the blade was tightly pressed against the other party's skin, and a shallow wound had been cut open without anyone noticing. A trickle of blood was slowly flowing down his neck. The faint smell of blood immediately awakened him. Looking at Liang Yue's handsome face in front of him, with a faint smile, the shop assistant shivered subconsciously, and then quickly got up from the ground. His mouth was gurgling with blood, and with a look of horror on his face, he led him towards the back hall. About a quarter of an hour later, the government's men finally arrived after hearing the news. After driving away the idlers around, they swarmed into the gold shop. It was a pity that Liang Yue had already climbed over the wall from the back door and left the scene at this time. After arriving at the back hall, he directed the squinting eyes to take him straight to the gold shop's vault. Faced with such a black shop that planned to plot against his gold bars and also wanted to send him to prison, Liang Yue naturally wouldn't be polite to them at this time. After knocking the shop assistant unconscious, he began a wanton search. Whether it was the gold and silver in the vault, or the shelves and wooden boxes used to store goods. They were all taken into the stronghold world in one go. Only after emptying the entire vault did Liang Yue stop, somewhat reluctantly turning his head and looking at the squinting eyes still lying by the wall. He hesitated for a moment, wondering whether to get rid of this person to avoid future troubles. After all, whether it was from the other party's previous actions, or the wanted poster that the government might issue after he left, Liang Yue didn't seem to have any reason to spare his life, but having grown up in a society ruled by law, he ultimately hesitated when he was about to act. "I'm always too soft-hearted, bearing all the problems myself." Humming an unclear little tune, Liang Yue did not leave immediately after leaving the gold shop at this moment. Instead, he circled around a big circle, put a dusty coat on himself in the middle, and finally returned to the previous bustling street. When passing by the entrance of the gold shop, this guy even stood in the crowd and watched the excitement for a while. It's just that Liang Yue at this moment was already somewhat different, especially that face. Although the face shape hadn't changed much, the skin already appeared wider, and the details of the facial features had also been slightly adjusted. Moreover, compared to before, the slightly resolute look between Liang Yue's eyebrows, the temperament on this guy's face had become more melancholy and gentle at a glance. It was almost like he had changed into a different person. At this moment, if there were other transmigrators from his previous life who had also come to the new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world in front of him, after meeting this guy, they would definitely exclaim, "How can there be people in this world who look so alike?" Disguise or mask, a disguise that changes appearance according to the wearer's will. Once formed, it cannot be changed again. It can only be used to cover the face and cannot affect the user's aura price. 500 points. This thing was one of the few 2 items that Liang Yue bought from the system store in the 2 weeks before the real world. According to the system's introduction, this mask seemed to be a product from a certain fantasy world. Its grade was not high, but it was a must-have item for some lone rangers to travel the Jianghu. The first time Liang Yue saw this item, he immediately realized that this thing would definitely be of great use to his future journey, so he bought it without hesitation and put it on the system store's long-term purchase list. In addition to this, the other item that Liang Yue bought was a pile of messy seeds, about 30 or 40, from the Don't Starve game world. Before starting the journey through the heavens, he had already planted them in the stronghold world, but because of the planting time, they had not yet officially grown up and matured. Therefore, it is temporarily impossible to judge what crops those seeds are specifically. Chapter 77: The Heartless Thief. Mother and Daughter. Mom. Wu Mom. Amidst a sorrowful cry, the crowd gradually gathered. A young woman dressed in plain cloth and mourning clothes, but with a face of captivating beauty, was kneeling on the street, her face covered in tears. Beside a lifeless woman, a flag written with white characters on black cloth stood beside them, selling herself to bury her mother. This girl is so pitiful, actually selling herself to bury her mother. If I had money, I would definitely buy her back. Don't be greedy for small gains. I heard that there are 2 female thieves here recently, called the Inhuman Mother and Daughter Thieves, who specialize in swindling people's money. Some people have had their entire house emptied by them. Is that so? But looking at her appearance, it doesn't seem like it. If she was born looking like a villain, who would be fooled? Let's go. Ouch. Among the crowd of onlookers, the discussion between 2 men seemed particularly clear, gradually becoming the focus of the surrounding people. Unexpectedly, after only a few steps, the cynical man suddenly felt a sharp pain in his buttocks, as if he had been pricked by a needle, causing him to limp. Unconsciously turning his head with a howl, he didn't expect that his butt had actually been stabbed with a needle. Frightened, the man, who had previously been unrestrained and outspoken, quickly pulled his companion and ran away, stumbling into the distance. Seeing this, the crowd of onlookers suddenly became chaotic, and many people, fearing being caught in the crossfire, dispersed in large numbers. Liang Yue was standing on the periphery of the crowd at this time, watching the whole process, and after smiling at this classic scene, he walked towards a nearby restaurant. That girl is Hong Dao, right? She really looks like Goddess Chu, but compared to this goddess in her prime, I'm more interested in her mother. Thousand Han Guanzhu's Ioqian. It is said that she was once the #1 beauty in the martial world. Although she has become an old woman now, her skill with hidden weapons is truly awe-inspiring. Looking back at the mother and daughter who were gradually being surrounded by the crowd again, Hong Dao, who was kneeling there, was also looking up at Liang Yue with her head lowered. For a moment, the 2's eyes met in the air. Goddess Chu glared at him fiercely with her big, amorous eyes, with a hint of threat in her eyes, while Liang Yue curled the corners of his mouth at her. Afterwards, he walked past Hong Wending, who was standing there woodenly, waiting for his father to return, and strolled into the restaurant. Waiter, bring me a hot pot. Slice more mutton, and add some tofu. Make sure there's enough sesame paste in the sauce, okay? This Taoist priest, please wait a moment. The fresh bone broth has been simmering all morning, guaranteed to satisfy you. Also, bring me 2 stir-fried dishes, something vegetarian will do, understood. What else would the Taoist priest like to order? Our shop has fine aged fenjiu. Visiting merchants say it's quite delicious. Would you like to try some? Then bring me a pot to try, okay? 1 set of bone hot pot. 2 plates of vegetarian dishes, 1 pot of aged fenjiu. Watching the waiter's attentive back as he left, Liang Yue was now filled with novelty. Constantly looking around, he saw that within the restaurant hall, although it couldn't be said to be overflowing with people, it was bustling with diners who had come to eat. Some were in groups of 3 or 5, some were facing each other in pairs, all with awkward bald heads, gathering together and talking loudly about trivial matters of life. In this situation, Liang Yue himself seemed a little out of place thanks to the Taoist identity arranged by the system. He didn't have to follow the Qing dynasty's customs in terms of dress or hairstyle. A blue-black Taoist robe, a yellowish-white inner lining with a right fastening closure, a hair bun high on the back of his head, slightly fair skin, and his current overly handsome appearance, and perceptibly, he had become the focus of the crowd from time to time. People in the hall would look at him, their faces unconsciously showing a hint of curiosity. Several wretched men in the corner were now staring at Liang Yue with ill intentions, rubbing their hands, their eyes gleaming, revealing a lustful look towards him. The insufficiency was very fast, and in just a minute or two, the steaming hot pot and charcoal had been brought up. From the unrestrained aroma of the soup, it could be judged that the shop must have been prepared in advance to deal with the endless stream of diners. After a while, the food and wine were all served, and Liang Yue poured himself a glass of aged fenjiu, nodding unconsciously as he smelled the rich aroma of the wine. But after taking a sip, this fellow knew that the wine must have been blended, and a lot of water had been added. However, Liang Yue didn't care about these things. The light ancient brewing method had its own unique flavor. After drinking a few cups in a row, he began to taste the meat and vegetables on the table. Just then, a burst of fierce shouts and fighting suddenly came from the second floor of the restaurant. Wood splintering, weapons clashing, and amidst the noise, there were occasional screams and groans. The noisy atmosphere in the hall suddenly quieted down, and the diners mostly shrank their heads, dared not speak, and listened intently to the movement upstairs. Some of the timid ones had even bent over and quietly slipped out the door winding. Just then, a shout suddenly came. Hong Winding, who had been standing at the entrance of the restaurant in a daze, immediately became like a machine that had been wound up, grabbed the restaurant's flagpole, and flew up to the second floor in a few steps. Liang Yue, who had been paying attention to this child, couldn't help but be stunned. Frankly speaking, if it were him, although he could also do this, relying on his superior physical fitness, grabbing the flagpole to go to the second floor was not too difficult. But in terms of style, Liang Yue was definitely not as elegant as him. This is just his son. If it were Hong Ziguan, his abilities would probably be much stronger. This is the legendary lightness skill, right? Speaking of which, this world of New Legend of Shaolin isn't considered a profound martial arts plane. It's just that the plot and fighting are a bit more brilliant in such a world. There shouldn't be any too mysterious martial arts, right? Liang Yue was eating while thinking to himself, facing the screams and the sound of fists and feet colliding like drums coming from the second floor. He didn't take it to heart, let alone have any intention of getting involved. Firstly, according to the development of the plot, the fighting on the second floor at this time was just a small scene, and for Brother Jet, there was nothing to fear. Faced with the betrayal of his own brothers and the encirclement of the Imperial Army, Hong Ziguan, while killing these people one by one, still had the energy to teach Hong Wending, who was watching from the sidelines, the principles of being a person. Secondly, Liang Yue at this time didn't seem to need to get involved because he didn't have this task. Chapter 78, A Bunch of Old Lass. Main mission: hunting the Quartz Hawks. Mission requirements: hunt and kill martial arts experts under the command of the Imperial Court by any means necessary. The mission time limit is half a year. Moninger, 8-armed Arhat, and the Western region's evil monk Kiba are among those who must be killed. Mission rewards: 800 points, 1 extra lottery opportunity. After completing the mission's minimum kill requirement, each additional kill beyond that will affect the mission rewards. Side mission: twisted plotline. Mission requirements: protect the personal safety of Chen Jinan, the chief helmsman of the Heaven and Earth Society, until the host leaves the training mission. World mission rewards: 500 points, 1 designated identity setting scroll. Chen Jinan. Speaking of which, In Liang Yu's understanding, Chen Jinan in this new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world is definitely the weakest of all the chief helmsmen of the Heaven and Earth Society that he knows. When he first appeared, he was full of imposing manner and a strong aura, surrounded by dozens of Heaven and Earth Society iron-blooded youths wearing white clothes and red flowers on their chests. He stepped in the background music and flew from the horizon to the roof. That aura was able to steadily suppress the absolute protagonist Hong Zhenwen, even when facing him in order to deal with Manninger, a Shaolin traitor who was suspected of having mastered invulnerable poison skills. This chief helmsman even used all kinds of methods, spending a lot of time and effort to collect a magical weapon known as the Giant Sword, said to be able to cut iron like mud. The result, it was able to kill a large number of soldiers, but when he faced Manninger, he was instantly killed in one encounter. On the other hand, Brother Ji truly lived up to his name as the Kung Fu Emperor. Even though the life-snatching throat-locking spear in his hand still couldn't break Manninger's defense, he was still able to find another way. After performing a series of shadowless kicks, he directly kicked the opponent into a vat of boiling sulfuric acid. This protagonist Halo too strong. As a result, when the system issued the mission, it also felt that there was really no need to send someone to protect him. At least, that's what Liang Yue thought. The sounds of fighting upstairs quickly subsided after a while. Under the collective gaze of awe from the crowd in the hall, the father and son walked down the stairs with cold expressions. Hong Zhenwen walked while slowly wrapping the life-snatching throat-locking spear in his hand. His moon-white robe was unstained by blood, but it still exuded a faint murderous aura. Hong Wending beside him also had a majestic and compelling appearance, constantly scanning the diners in the hall with his gaze. Basically, wherever this little brat's gaze landed, the people there would pretend to be ostriches with their heads down, not daring to meet his eyes. A good number of diners were actually stared out of the restaurant by him. Of course, this definitely didn't include Liang Yue at this time. He was still leisurely eating mutton hot pot, occasionally picking up his wine glass and pouring himself a drink. It wouldn't be until the 5 children who escaped from Shaolin Temple arrived, on the night of Mother Benevolent and Hongdao's mother's wedding, that they would embark on another escape route. Liang Yue estimated that the whole process would probably last 2 to 3 months. During such a long time, he naturally wouldn't foolishly stay with them, so where should he go? Regarding this point, Liang Yue had actually already made plans. The moment he saw the system mission, he had already made a decision. Let's go to Shaolin Temple. It is estimated that the news of the treasure map has already been leaked. That place will soon be besieged by the Imperial Court's troops, and then turned into a sea of fire as the ancestral temple of Zen Buddhism, which has been passed down for thousands of years. The foundation within the temple must be extremely amazing. Even if they suddenly have a brain fart now and reverse their consistent belief in self-preservation in this world to support the Heaven and Earth Society, the Sutra Depository is still there. As long as I get all the martial arts secrets in the Sutra Depository before the government soldiers set fire, wouldn't they all be mine? No. Although those old monks have always stayed in the temple, they are all very cunning. Since they know that the news of the treasure map has been leaked, they will definitely arrange a backup plan. Maybe, before tattooing the drawings on the backs of the 5 children, they had already sent people to transfer the 72 arts of Shaolin, and even the Yi Jin Jing. But even so, I should still go and explore first. Moreover, Manninger and the 8-armed Arhat seem to be involved in the burning of Shaolin when the time comes. If I can. Just as Liang Yue was holding chopsticks in one hand and fantasizing in his heart, a hand suddenly landed on his shoulder, and then pinched it seemingly intentionally. Liang Yue was stunned at this moment. He turned his head and saw that the person who came was actually the few wretched men in the corner of the hall before this little Taoist priest. Some strange things have happened in my house these past few days, causing me to be restless and my blood to surge, which is making me very upset. I wonder, Taoist priest, can you move to my house and drive away the evil spirits on my body? If so, I will definitely. As he said that, the wretched man put on a deliberately coy look, took the hand that he had just placed on Liang Yue's shoulder to his nose, and sniffed it hard. Damn it. Upon seeing this, Liang Yue's mind went blank, and then a burst of blood surged in his chest, making him almost vomit. Looking at the few old perverts beside him who were looking at him with glowing eyes, Liang Yue's face immediately turned black. He reached out and grabbed the hand that had just been placed on his shoulder. Then, he twisted it hard, broke it, and buckled it. Crack. Snap. Pop. After 3 crisp sounds in succession, this arm was twisted into a twist in the blink of an eye. The wretched man in question hadn't even reacted yet. Afterwards, Liang Yue still felt that it was not enough. He got up and kicked the man's kneecap hard. Crack. One of this guy's legs was immediately folded in half, and even the white bone forks emerged from his clothes. After a scream of misery, The wretched man fell softly to the ground, his face full of horror and inexplicable color. The several companions behind him were dumbfounded at this time, seemingly not understanding what was going on at all. They thought, how could a pretty little white-faced Taoist priest suddenly transform into a demon at this time? Liang Yue could see that these people were just ordinary people with abnormal orientations, but he couldn't control whether you were abnormal or not. But it was your fault for coming to disgust him since you dared to come looking for trouble. Then don't blame him for being rude. Bang! Along with a muffled sound of breaking, the stool that Liang Yue was originally sitting on was swung up by him, but just as it was approaching the head, a trace of hesitation flashed through his mind subconsciously. He deviated the trajectory, and finally smashed the stool on the wretched man's back for a time. Wood chips splashed and blood spurted wildly. What a nuisance. Afterwards, Liang Yue walked out of the restaurant with a gloomy face amidst the shock and panic of the diners in the hall. Before leaving, he didn't forget to grab a handful of silver from the storage space and throw it to the stunned shopkeeper behind the counter, as payment for the meal. Chapter 79 Infinite Magma. System, can you help me solve the problem of lifespan limitations now? Leading a horse slowly along the official road outside the town, Liang Yue subconsciously frowned, tugging at the fringe of hair on his forehead, and asked the system ding. Please solve it yourself, host. Alright. Actually, Liang Yue wasn't really that concerned about his own lifespan at the moment because he firmly believed that, based on the current frequency of entering the various worlds for training once a month, he would probably be able to solve this problem himself before long. The reason for asking this question was only because the changes in his body had been a bit too great in the past few months. Think about it, how long had Liang Yue been in New York in the real world before? Leaving aside the current new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world, he had only stayed in the real world for a little over 2 months. But if you add the training time in the Mech and Apocalypse worlds, this period would be extended by half. Moreover, under normal circumstances, after Liang Yue returned home from school in the real world, he would habitually enter the base world to enjoy the doubled time bonus and make this added another 2 months. Adding all these times together, it's half a year. So, in the 2 months or so in the real world, Liang Yue himself had lived for more than half a year, almost 3 times as long as the former. Think about it, Sam, Pete, and his cute little Japanese desk mate, who had been getting a long day and night at school for 2 months. Also, Elizabeth, the blonde girl who pestered Liang Yue every afternoon in order to copy his skills. Although this girl's purpose in approaching him was not pure, she was indeed the closest person to him, especially since Liang Yue is currently entering a period of rapid development in his life, and his body will undergo some imperceptible changes almost every 10 days or half a month. Now it's good. In this new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world, the time limit for the main quest has been directly extended from 1 month in the past to half a year. Think about it, if this guy stays here for half a year, but only less than a second has passed in the real world, it would be a ghost if others didn't notice anything unusual when he goes to school the next day. But that's the way it is, and there's nothing we can do about it for the time being. Just like that, from less than 2 o'clock in the afternoon until dusk, Liang Yue had been struggling with this problem until the sun on the horizon was about to set. When the distant sunset gradually went out and the sky gradually darkened, this guy suddenly came back to his senses. Looking around, his eyes were full of confusion. Where am I? Did I miss the place to stay? Looking at the official road extending straight to the end of his line of sight, with trees and dead leaves on both sides, Liang Yue was somewhat at a loss for a while. However, for him, who possesses the character abilities of Mech, wilderness survival is a very simple matter. Moreover, Liang Yue can now be sure that he has definitely not missed the path to the Shaolin Temple on Mount Song. He had inquired very carefully in the town before that the Ma family village was about 2 days away from the Shaolin Temple, and he could reach it by following the official road. He had only been in a daze for half a day, so it was impossible for him to miss the station. After making this judgment, Liang Yue didn't waste any time. Looked around, and quickly found a flat area at the foot of the hillside. After felling a few more trees, a temporary campsite was formed. However, the current new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world is in the winter season, and although Liang Yue doesn't really care about this temperature, he is even less willing to sleep in the open air like this. So, building a temporary shelter to shelter from the wind and rain has become imperative. But fortunately, this is not difficult for Liang Yue at all. In less than 3 minutes, a house made entirely of stones was formed. This building is square and almost devoid of any sense of decoration. Rather than a house, it is more like a large stone box. The area inside the house is about 20 or 30 square meters. After entering the door, there is a simple partition made of stone walls in front of you, and Liang Yue arranged the horse next to it. He spent a little thought to build 2 food troughs, one for water, and the other filled with a small batch of feed mixed with potatoes, carrots, apples, wheat, salt and other things. After solving the horse's food and accommodation problems, Liang Yue turned around and looked at the sky outside the door. I saw that at this time, the last ray of light from the outside had slowly disappeared into the end of the sky with the sun, and the surroundings were already a dark scene. So, Liang Yue flicked his sleeves and took out a few torches and inserted them around. And the entire stone house suddenly became brightly lit with a house and light. The next step is naturally to make a fire and cook, but as in make person, what is making a fire? I saw Liang Yue take out an iron pickaxe and quickly tap it on the ground a few times, and a stone pit of 90 centimeters square was formed. Then, this guy moved his mind and took out an iron bucket from the storage space, the inside of which was still flashing with orange viscous light. After pouring the contents of the bucket into the stone pit and surrounding it with a circle of stone piers, a permanent campfire was formed. Environmental protection, energy saving, and without spending any fuel. McWorld infinite lava. You deserve to have it with this lava. The temperature in the stone house began to rise rapidly, and in a short while, the room became warm as spring. This heating effect is definitely much better than air conditioning. Liang Yue didn't idle in the middle either, picking and choosing a pile of ingredients from the storage space, including fresh food, fruits and vegetables, as well as cumin, chili, green onions, garlic, soy sauce and other seasonings, putting an iron net on the lava stove, oysters on the shelf, meat and vegetables skewered, and in a short while, a variety of barbecue was made. He was about to take out a barrel of homemade beer from the base world as a drink, but after Liang Yue thought about it, he thought it was better to forget it. Thinking about his previous experience, he had just arrived in this world for half a day, and he had encountered 3 waves of people who wanted to be unfavorable to him, and this kind of wonderful thing happened in a relatively peaceful town. Tonight he is staying in the wild, and if he encounters a strong man on a night road, he will have to get into another entanglement. Since I'm here for training, I can't be as comfortable as before. I have to be as vigilant as possible at night. Chapter 80 Burning of Shaolin Temple. Although that was what he was planning in his heart, there was still a considerable gap between reality and imagination. Without the pressure of survival forcing him, Liang Yue only managed to persist for a few hours. By midnight, the stone house beside the official road was filled with his hearty snores. He didn't even wake up from his sweet slumber until the next morning, roused by the neighing of the horse beside him. With a sleepy look on his face, Liang Yue leaned against the doorway of the stone house, his hands in his pockets, yawning as he watched the endless stream of soldiers passing by on the official road. Not far away from these troops, Liang Yue could vaguely discern a chilling aura of bloodlust. According to the information he had gathered, only a little over 30 years had passed since the establishment of the Qing dynasty. The Kangxi emperor, who would later be regarded by some as a great ruler of the ages, had only recently ascended the throne. At this time, the young emperor was probably still lying low, and the power of the court was likely still in the hands of several regents. As one of the first soldiers of the Qing dynasty, their fighting power was indeed quite good. These hundreds of soldiers passing by on the road were clearly the elite among them. From afar, they all looked strong and well built, carrying with them the aura of seasoned veterans. Judging by the situation, could these people be rushing to the Shaolin Temple? Is it really such a coincidence? As soon as this thought arose, Liang Yue's heart stirred. After considering this, Liang Yue turned around and went back into the house. He washed his face in the trough, took care of his personal hygiene, and then began to prepare breakfast for the day. After a flurry of activity, about half an hour passed before he was full and satisfied. Then, he rode a tall horse beside him and continued on his way. Along the way, he followed behind the soldiers at a leisurely pace, following the traces of their march on the road, neither getting too close nor worrying about losing the group in the middle of the journey. When it was time for a meal, Liang Yue didn't forget to stop and treat himself and his horse. Finally, on the morning of the second day, he arrived at a small town at the foot of Shaoxi Mountain. At this time, a group of about 400 or 500 soldiers had already gathered here and began to head towards the Shaolin Temple along the mountain road with great momentum. Liang Yue's arrival was almost like a drop of water in the ocean for this small town. Hardly noticeable, a large number of people were gathering in the town, craning their necks to watch the marching troop, discussing it enthusiastically and chaotically. After lodging his horse in an inn, Liang Yue mingled into the crowd, silently observing the Qing soldiers in the distance. When all the soldiers had set off up the mountain and the crowd of onlookers gradually dispersed, his figure had already disappeared at some unknown time. Soon, about an hour later, after avoiding the layers of checkpoints set up by the soldiers on the mountain road, and wading through the messy branches and dead grass, Liang Yue finally arrived at the outer perimeter of the Shaolin Temple from the side of the mountain slope kill. At this time, the soldiers' offensive against Shaolin had already begun, and the temple was filled with fierce shouts of killing. The Qing army seemed to be adhering to their past tactics of looting and pillaging. Once they entered a gathering area, they would set fires everywhere, igniting the surrounding buildings. Patches of fire and smoke were rising from all directions in the temple, slowly covering the nearby sky. Liang Yue was standing at the base of the wall on the outer corner of the temple, changing into a set of Qing army uniforms that he had stripped from a checkpoint soldier on the way up a mountain. The uniform was gray and light, of very poor quality, with almost no defensive properties. Liang Yue was standing there awkwardly, wearing a red-topped hat and a large soldier character embroidered in black on a white background on his chest, feeling uncomfortable inside and out. This is a knockoff. Pulling up the clothes for a glance, Liang Yue rolled his eyes. Obviously, as a student who knew a bit about history, he could certainly recognize that this military uniform was definitely not genuine. The reason for this was probably related to the director's script. However, Liang Yue at this time didn't dwell too much on these trivial details. He flipped his sleeve, and a pickaxe instantly appeared in his palm. Then, he waved it repeatedly at the wall in front of him. A few seconds later, a simple rectangular doorway, 90 wide and 180 high, appeared before his eyes. Stepping into it, Liang Yue flipped his sleeve again, and the pickaxe in his palm was instantly replaced by two standard Qing army officers' knives. The knives looked like waist sabers, and the quality was passable. Although they felt a little light in his hand, they were quite handy to wield. Just then, a burst of noise suddenly came from ahead. Huff huff hiss. Huff, accompanied by heavy breathing and gasping. A disheveled monk quickly emerged from the corner of a Buddhist hall. At this time, the monk looked battered and exhausted, terrified, with sweat all over his head. He had also been slashed on the shoulder, and large patches of blood had already stained his robe. While running, he frantically looked back to see what was happening. Unexpectedly, just as he turned the corner, he ran head-on into Liang Yue, who was wielding two knives and swinging them back and forth. Upon seeing this, the monk cried out in alarm. His legs went weak, and he collapsed directly to the ground, kicking the ground with his feet, looking at someone with a desperate expression. Seeing this, Liang Yue couldn't help but secretly curl his lips, and doubts immediately arose in his heart about the so-called Shaolin warrior monk whom afterward, he was too lazy to talk nonsense with a monk. He pointed his chin at the doorway opened in the wall, signaling him to get lost quickly. The monk was stunned for a moment, but then his face lit up with surprise. After giving Liang Yue a grateful nod, he scrambled up from the ground, covering his wound, and escaped through the small door in the wall, finding his way to freedom. Liang Yue didn't stay in place at this time. He held the two knives in his hand and slowly walked towards the temple in the direction the monk had come from. As a result, before a few seconds had passed, a tall, sturdy Qing soldier with a beard on his face came running from the opposite direction. "Where is that monk? I've already killed him." "Well done." Chapter 81: The Importance of Learning a Language. The Manchu soldier with a thick beard approaching spoke in Manchu. Liang Yue, of course, didn't understand this minority language, but thanks to the language mastery skill granted by the system, he could understand the language instantly and without any difficulty. Moreover, what's even more amazing is that when Liang Yue replied in Chinese, the Qing soldier actually heard the language he was familiar with. Therefore, although the language mastery skill seems inconspicuous, its effect is almost miraculous. As a result, when the Qing soldier heard Liang Yue also replying in his native Manchu, he subconsciously chose to believe this compatriot whose appearance was a bit unfamiliar. Besides, compared to 2 days ago, Liang Yue had already taken off the mask of the imposter, so although his appearance was a bit more refined now, his wheat-colored skin didn't look much different from the Tartar's brother. "Where have the adults attacked now? Do we need to go over and help quickly?" Afterward, in order not to give the other party a chance to question him, Liang Yue pretended to wipe his knife with his sleeve and asked preemptively, "It seems like they were about to attack the main hall. Our offensive is progressing smoothly. Let's go. We can't let others steal the credit." The Qing soldier on the opposite side was stunned when he heard this, but subconsciously answered according to his words. A sharp tip of the knife directly pierced from the back of the opponent's head and extended from the eye socket. A burly Tartar strongman died without resistance under his despicable sneak attack. Afterward, Liang Yue continued forward without stopping, without looking at the corpse again during the whole process. After walking a few more steps, the bodies of 3 monks, 2 large and 1 small, appeared on an open space at the corner. A Qing soldier with gray hair, but without any compassion, was squatting beside the 3, Searching them, his focus was actually on the child who had already lost his breath. It seemed that the Queen Court had indeed learned in advance that the treasure map was tattooed on the backs of 5 children. Who are you? Where did that kid who Wenabo go? After hearing the footsteps, the Queen soldier looked up at him calmly. Seeing that Liang Yue was not a familiar figure, he quietly put his hand on the knife at his waist, and then slowly stood up from the ground, with a cold look on his face when asking the question. He also used Manchu that brother seems to be dealing with an injured monk, and should be coming over soon. After slowly coming to the front of the other party, Liang Yue raised the knife in his left hand and pointed to the corner behind him. When the Queen soldier heard his fluent native language, he immediately let down his guard, and subconsciously looked in the direction he was pointing, but he didn't notice the guy's quietly raised right hand. Shoo! A flash of the knife, and half of the other party's skull immediately flew up. And red and white things followed and scattered all over the ground, and the whole person then fell softly to the ground. Some traces had even been dotted on Liang Yue's clothes, but at this time he was not in the mood to pay attention to these, pursed his lips, and stared at the young corpse for a long time. Only then did he sigh softly. A cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes, and he continued forward along the road under his feet. Soon, after passing through a narrow path, Liang Yue seemed to have come to a place with well-arranged houses, and in terms of the layout and style of these buildings, it didn't look like a monk's house where ordinary monks could live. However, at this time, Liang Yue was already a little dizzy from turning around in this temple. He kept trying to find the Queen soldiers and the sutra depository, and for a while, he couldn't figure out where he had run. Be careful, don't damage these books. Just as Liang Yue was looking around blankly, a burst of noise suddenly came from a Buddhist hall not far away, and then 3 or 4 Queen soldiers were seen carrying a box, walking out carefully. Seeing this, Liang Yue immediately walked over and shouted to these people in a familiar manner, "Is that some valuable thing? Is it worth a lot of money?" "It's worth a sheep dung egg's worth of money. They're all cabinets of books." A short Queen soldier with a thick and strong body heard this and subconsciously looked up at him with a face full of disdain and replied, "Then what are you doing with these broken toys?" Liang Yue had already come to the side of a few people with a smile at this time, raised his foot and kicked the box. "We don't want to either. Isn't this the task that Master Kaba confessed before?" Master Kaba, if Liang Yue guessed correctly, should be one of the must-kill targets in the system's main quest. It is said that he is a demon monk from the western regions who is good at some strange secret techniques. Moninger, the big villain in this world, was revived by him with poison when he was on the verge of death, and he was also trained into human-like, ghost-like, invulnerable, and powerful appearance. Oh, I said it turned out to be Master Kaba's order. Since it's his old man's order, we should naturally follow it. By the way, could it be that the box is filled with Shaolin Temple's martial arts secrets? I don't know, but I think it should be not simple. Yes, we have put all the books in the abbot's room into this box. If there are any secrets, there should be many, right? Oh? Then thank you very much. What are you thanking us for? Because I happen to need these books very much, eh? Looking at the 4 Queen soldiers in front of him with confused expressions, Liang Yue suddenly showed a grim expression and unceremoniously raised the knife in his hand. With 2 quick swipes, 4 heads flew into the air while rolling. The whole process was clean and neat, without any procrastination. Large swaths of blood sprayed into the sky, and then fell densely, like falling raindrops. Liang Yue stretched out his hand and stroked the box in front of him, subconsciously wanting to open the box to check it out. But he finally restrained himself. His eyes swept over the fallen corpses again, and a hint of sarcasm flashed in his eyes. "Really? Thank you." Waving his hand to send the box into the storage space, Liang Yue raised his eyes and looked around. After confirming that there was nothing left out, he flashed and ran into a small road next to him. Afterward, he quietly approached the direction of the main battlefield along the intense slashing sounds that kept echoing in the air. In the process of rushing, this guy relied on sneak attacks and other means to successively take down a dozen scattered Queen soldiers, and rescued several unarmed monks from the mouths of these monks. Liang Yue finally figured out the location of the Sutra Depository. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82: A Black Pineapple. I came to this Shaolin temple for the martial arts scriptures in the Sutra Pavilion. Saving people is just a side task. With a single slash, he shattered the skull of a Queen soldier. Looking at the corpses beneath his feet that almost covered the ground, a mix of Qing soldiers and monks, Liang Yue exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and continued walking towards the sutra pavilion. The sounds of fighting grew louder and louder, and the air was filled with smoke and the stench of blood. Having just passed through 2 Buddhist halls, a battlefield appeared before him. This was the open space in front of the Great Hero Hall, where a large number of Qing soldiers were confronting the monks. The numbers of the two sides were vastly different, with the Qing soldiers naturally having the advantage in numbers. Their equipment was also more sophisticated. Holding swords, shields, and long spears, they slowly advanced with their battle flags. The monks were fewer in number, but generally more skilled in martial arts. Although they only held wooden sticks, they were not at a disadvantage even when facing 3 enemies at once, and could even steadily suppress the Qing soldiers' attacks. However, this situation was quickly broken after soldiers with bows and arrows joined from the rear. With a whoosh, a rain of arrows fell, and the monks retreated one after another after being hit. Some who couldn't dodge in time were surrounded and killed by the Qing soldiers in front of them. But according to his understanding of the plot, among these officials, there should be the 8-armed Arhat, one of the main mission's assassination targets. The only one wearing a Tibetan monk's robe next to him, with a buzz cut, must be the Western region demon monk, Kiba. As for Moninger, the great villain of the new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world, the Shaolin traitor, he should be lurking around at this time, but has not yet appeared. Should I take this opportunity to wipe out all these people? With the M134 rapid-firing machine gun in my storage space, and tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition from the base world, as long as I aim accurately, I should be able to prevent these people from escaping. Right, the M134 rapid-firing machine gun is the one commonly known as the Vulcan Gatling, with a rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute and an effective range of 800 meters. With such a powerful weapon in hand, coupled with Liang Yue's well-honed marksmanship and the blessing of advanced gun skills, killing these small soldiers in front of him, as well as a few martial artists from a low martial world, would be about as easy as cutting wheat. However, after Liang Yue looked at the large group of martial monks not far ahead who were fighting fiercely with the Qing soldiers, he hesitated. He estimated that if he really started such a reckless strafing, there probably wouldn't be many monks left on the other side. A team of people, come with me. Just then, Kiba, wearing a red and yellow Tibetan monk's robe, suddenly turned around and waved to the Qing soldiers who were constantly reinforcing from various places behind him. Then, he walked towards a side door. Liang Yue was standing not far behind this demon monk, and as a result, he was naturally swept along by the surrounding Qing troops to follow him. He's going to. It looks like that's the direction of the Sutra Pavilion. Thinking back to the few Qing soldiers he had encountered outside the abbot's room earlier, who were said to have taken on the task of collecting various books from this master Kiba. Great. This is effortless. Liang Yue was walking in the team at this time, subconsciously looking around, and found that there were only about a dozen people who were taken away apart from the Western region demon monk Kiba leading the way. The rest should just be ordinary Qing soldiers. Even if he didn't have modern firearms and ammunition to help him, it wouldn't be difficult to deal with these people with his own abilities. Some time ago, since Liang Yue reopened his exploration of the Mech world, he had been consciously training his close combat abilities. The firearms on his body were consciously forbidden by this guy, and dual blades became his new main weapon, relying on his physical fitness that exceeded human limits, as well as the heaven-defying abilities of the Mech game character itself. Liang Yue had always maintained an impressive record of being unharmed during the entire 2-week exploration process. At the same time, under the dual tempering of close and long-range combat against zombies, skeleton archers, creepers, spiders, and other monsters, his use of the dual blades in his hands naturally became more and more skilled. It's a pity that I didn't comprehend a skill like dual swords, and even the improvement of basic swordsmanship is not great. Is this reminding me of the importance of one-hit kills? Just as Liang Yue was distracted and thinking, the group finally arrived at their destination. The building in front of them was not tall, with only 3 floors in total, about 10 meters high, but it was such an unremarkable pavilion building that contained the accumulation of Shaolin Temple for thousands of years, and the foundation for its existence in this martial arts world. You guys wait here. After leaving a light sentence, the Western region demon monk Kiba couldn't wait to break into the small building. Liang Yue couldn't see his expression at this time, but he thought that the other party should be very eager and happy. Right, it's a pity. You are destined not to get your wish today. Silently curving the corners of his mouth, Liang Yue scanned around a few times, and then slowly walked towards the side. Where are you going? A Qing soldier with a face full of horizontal flesh next to him saw this and subconsciously asked him, and the others around him also looked over. Ping, I've been holding it in since I went up the mountain." Liang Yue didn't care when he heard this, and casually made up a sentence, and then quickly came to a pine tree more than 10 meters away. He unbuttoned his belt and really started to pee there. Zlala. The amount was quite large. Everyone else was speechless when they saw this. About a minute later, this guy finally let out a long sigh of relief. Looking refreshed and happy, leisurely fastening his belt, but no one noticed that when he turned around again, there was an inconspicuous object in his hand. This thing looked round and rolling, dark, and a bit like a pineapple. Dingling. A small pull ring was casually thrown on the ground by him, making a crisp sound, releasing the safety. Liang Yue then silently recited in his mouth 1 2 3. After counting to this point, Liang Yue immediately threw this thing into the air. The black pineapple drew a beautiful arc in the air, and soon crossed the distance of more than 10 meters and came to the top of the Qing army at the same time. Liang Yue suddenly flipped his sleeve, and a small cube flashing with metallic luster instantly appeared in his palm. With 2 snaps, a solid metal pillar of 90 centimeters square and 180 in height suddenly appeared in front of him. Chapter 83 Western Demon Monk. For reaching this countdown, Liang Yue hugged his arms and instantly squatted behind the pillar, lowering his head into curled position. Boom, accompanied by a muffled roar, the black pineapple blossomed above the Qing soldiers' heads, like a dandelion being ignited, with countless luminous buds blooming in the air at that moment. Wherever it passed, everything was defeated. Before a dozen Qing soldiers could understand what was happening, they were instantly riddled with holes, and a large cloud of blood mist rose up. However, the power of this grenade was far more than that. After engulfing the Qing soldiers, the countless, rapidly firing buds still scraped out trails of fire in the air, and continued to spread around without stopping. Crackling, swoosh, clang clang, puff puff, bang. For a time, all sorts of chaotic impact sounds echoed around. The solid metal pillar in front of Liang Yue was exceptionally sturdy, so there was no problem. After a burst of dense impact sounds, it remained firm, but the few trees beside him suffered as a result. Facing the side of the explosion, large swaths of leaves were smashed and thrown away, over half of the branches were bent and broken, and even more so, bark flew off the main trunk, and debris puffed up, with a dense array of bullet holes instantly covering the entire tree trunk. In fact, it wasn't just this tree. The soil in front of the tree, the smooth bluestone floor, and even the majestic sutra pavilion located not far away, were all affected by the grenade, and a large amount of power penetrated through here. For a time, earth and rocks flew, stone railings became muddled, and wooden doors and windows collapsed and shattered during the process. Liang Yue even vaguely heard a muffled groan coming from inside the sutra pavilion at the instant the explosion ended. This power, unmatched. After the power of this grenade completely subsided, Liang Yue slowly stood up from behind the pillar, subconsciously taking the iron pickaxe and restoring the solid metal pillar to its metal material. While looking around after a long while, he couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He thought to himself that if he wanted to achieve this effect with manpower alone, just with the power of this black pineapple, he would probably have a long way to go. Steel ball grenades are said to be the most powerful and lethal of all grenades. Its greatest power is not reflected in the explosive component of the grenade, but in the hundreds or even thousands of small steel balls inside the grenade that are densely blasted out by the force of the explosion. With a bang, it's like a celestial maiden scattering flowers, and wherever it passes, it's impossible to defend against. It is said that the maximum kill radius of this type of grenade can reach about 50 meters. Liang Yue hadn't understood it much before, but based on his current field verification, it's really about the same. Needless to say, grenades of this power are absolutely not allowed to be bought and sold by civilians. If Liang Yue hadn't raided an entire weapons factory in Takaname City during the apocalypse world, he wouldn't have such good things in his hands. But even so, he didn't have much stock on him. After all, munitions are manufactured to be used, but based solely on the dispatch rate of the Japanese self-defense forces, there is basically no consumption to speak of. In the limited number of multinational joint operations, those people were responsible for logistics for the U.S. military. They couldn't even use up a few bullets, let alone this kind of battlefield weapon. Looking at the devastated scene in front of him, Liang Yue couldn't help but feel a trace of annoyance in his heart. If I had known that this grenade was so powerful, I should have thrown one at that bunch of officials back at the Mahavira Hall, and I would have taken them out in one fell swoop. Regretfully shaking his head, with a flip of his sleeve, 2 waist knives suddenly appeared in his palm. Liang Yue then turned his head to look at the sutra pavilion not far away, and a fiery light suddenly bloomed in his eyes. I don't know whether the martial artists in this world cultivate internal energy or national arts. The original plot doesn't seem to have a clear explanation, but fortunately, their martial strength is not too high. Gently pushing the door in front of him, in a burst of wooden, dilapidated moans, the originally thick wooden door collapsed, and Liang Yue stepped into the pavilion. Meeting him was a pool of fresh blood on the ground not far away, which proved that he hadn't misheard before. The evil monk Kiba from the western regions was indeed injured by the scattered steel balls, and it seemed that the injury was not light. It's just that at this time, the bald donkey had already disappeared, not knowing where he was hiding. The doors and windows all around are closed, so the other party should not have run out of this suture pavilion yet, and the noise of the wooden stairs in this area is generally a bit loud. Once stepped on, I would inevitably notice it, so he's still hiding here. With this judgment, Liang Yue couldn't help but raise the vigilance in his heart again, raising his ears high and listening intently to all the sounds around him. Time passed by, and Liang Yue had unknowingly wandered through half of the first floor of the suture pavilion. Although the other party hid very well, he was ultimately discovered a clue. Found it. That was a shadow located at the lower edge of the stairs. Although it was broad daylight outside the suture pavilion at this time, it was inevitable that there would be places inside the scripture building where the sun could not shine. A trace of bloody smell was emanating from there, and the faint breathing was almost undetectable. The figure in the shadows would have to wait a full tens of seconds before performing a respiratory transition, this kind of breath-holding rhythm that belongs to martial arts practitioners. Even with Liang Yue's current physical fitness, coupled with a zone state that can exert all his abilities, he was barely able to notice it when he got close. Awesome. I remember that in the original plot, this guy's martial strength and those 3 must-kill targets seems to be only at the bottom, right? In the showdown with Hong Wending and a few other kids, he was seriously injured and vomited blood by a wave of shadowless kicks, and finally died disgracefully under Fang Daoheng's butt squat. But even such a person is not easy to deal with. Under the zone state, many of Liang Yue's original plans in his heart were re-optimized by him in a very short period of time. With a flip of his sleeve, a waist knife disappeared, and this guy silently took out a grenade from the storage space that was somewhat similar in shape to a water cup, gently pulling open the pull ring. Liang Yue then slowly squatted down and tossed it towards the diagonal range of the lower edge of the stairs. Afterwards, this guy immediately flashed his figure and actually hid behind the bookshelf, with his back to the direction of the grenade. Bang! Accompanied by a roaring explosion, a burst of dazzling white light suddenly erupted from the grenade. This place is the suture pavilion of the Shaolin Temple. Liang Yue's purpose in coming this time was also for the collection of books inside, so naturally he couldn't directly blow up the place with a grenade. Therefore, as a wonderful thing to win by surprise, the flashbang was undoubtedly his best choice. Chapter 84 Invulnerable to Swords and Guns, Moning. In Chapter X27, accompanied by the burst of bright light, a sharp scream suddenly came from behind. Subsequently, staggering footsteps also appeared. Obviously, the Kiba Dharma master, hiding in the shadows, was not aware of the specific effect of that ammunition, and suffered a great loss under this blinding weapon. After the surrounding glare dissipated, Liang Yue turned around and walked out from behind the bookshelf, holding double sabers in his hands, and walked towards the Tibetan-robed monk in the distance, who was constantly rubbing his eyes and looking dizzy. According to Liang Yue's own understanding, flashbangs are not only capable of releasing strong light, but also can cause tinnitus and temporary loss of thinking ability when they explode. The shaven-headed lama in front of him was obviously out of luck. Having practiced martial arts for many years and mastered many strange techniques, truly a versatile individual, unfortunately, he encountered Liang Yue, who didn't play by the rules, and after carelessly taking 2 grenades in a row, his years of hard work were instantly rendered useless, without even a chance to use his skills. Who are you? Ugh, why are you so despicable? Let's go. On the road, looking at the monk in front of him with a twisted and painful face, unable to stand still, but still stubbornly trying to curse him, Liang Yue immediately raised his saber without hesitation and delivered a diagonal slash to the back of his head. With a soft sound, the blade instantly cut into the other party's skull, and this imperial hound, who had a lot of screen time in the original plot, received his lunchbox without making any contribution. Subconsciously glancing at the mission data, after confirming that this monk was really dead, Liang Yue relaxed, and the zone state was also released. According to Jiang Hu practice, shouldn't there be some legacy left after the boss hangs up? Not to mention martial arts secrets or treasure maps, at least there should be some hard currency on him, eh? There's really something hard. It looks like, oh my, it's actually a piece of iron plate. Relying on this to block the grenade? That's too naive. Even if you really blocked it, so what? I have at least a dozen ways to play you to death. After a round of looting the corpse and finding no spoils, Liang Yue could only stand up awkwardly. Then, looking around, Rows of bookshelves were neatly arranged in front of him, filled with various books, the number of which was indeed not small according to common sense. It is unlikely that any precious books are stored on the first floor of the Shaolin Sutra depository. Most of the stacks of books in front of him should be mainly various printed copies of Buddhist scriptures and some unimportant miscellaneous books. However, in order to prevent those bald donkeys from playing tricks on him, Liang Yue thought for a while and decided to take them all in anyway. I have a lot of space at home, and I'm not afraid of your things being too many. When I catch a time to go back, I'll carefully identify them one by one, and I can also practice my observation skills. I'll collect the valuable ones, and burn the useless ones as firewood. Anyway, I have to stay here for half a year. I have plenty of time to find them. Slowly, while talking to himself, Liang Yue, holding the map, quickly circled the hall in front of him wherever he passed. None of the original rows of bookshelves in the room were left behind, and they were all thrown into the wall of the stronghold world by this guy. In just a moment, the huge room suddenly became empty. Looking around, after checking again and confirming that there were no omissions or hidden compartments, Liang Yue continued to go to the second floor along the stairs. In about 5 minutes, he had toured the entire sutra depository, which was not very big to begin with. As a result, it was indeed as Liang Yue had expected. The monks of Shaolin Temple had already transferred the secrets in this sutra depository in advance. The entire third floor was empty, without leaving a single book or text. Although the second floor was a little better, the remaining ones were just handwritten copies of Buddhist scriptures by previous generations, which were of no use apart from being able to be used as antiques and sold for money. It was of almost no value to Liang Yue. What is this? Could it be that I've been working for nothing these 2 days? With a stinky face, this guy walked out of the sutra depository, stamping his feet all the way, and looked around with his hands on his hips. The shouts of killing in the distance seemed to have weakened at this time. After some hesitation, in order to prevent himself from really ending up as a bystander, Liang Yue decided that he should first complete the system task. So, with a flick of his sleeve, the 2 waist knives were immediately held in his palms again, and then this guy trotted all the way towards the direction of the Great Hero Hall. In a moment, Liang Yue returned to the spacious courtyard in front of the main hall, which resembled a square at this time. The Qing army, under the combat mode of multi-arms coordination, was about to advance to the position of the hall door. Looking at those officials who were standing behind the large group of troops, leisurely commanding the battle this time, Liang Yue didn't hesitate any longer. With a flick of his sleeve, he took out a steel ball grenade from the storage space, intending to wipe out that group of people. That is, however, according to Liang Yue's understanding of the plot, it was enough to judge that this guy's identity should be the great villain of this world. The Shaolin traitor Ma Ning, the yellow substance smeared all over his body, should be a strange poison mixed with a large amount of metal powder, and its reputation for being invulnerable to swords and guns in this world originated from this. However, this villainous leader was not participating in the battle below at this time, but was quietly moving towards a certain position on the roof in his hands. He was also holding a vehicle that looked like a canoe, a car. It was made of all-metal material, with a fully enclosed design, and was covered in blades. At first glance, it gave people a sense of heaviness. If the roof of this Shaolin main hall was not of good enough quality, it would probably not be able to support this weight. But to be honest, if there were no 2 wheels under this thing, Liang Yue would not be able to tell that it was a car. Familiar with the entire plot, he naturally knew that Ma Ning's actions at this moment did indeed have a miraculous effect. Later, when the monks of Shaolin Temple were defeated one after another and were driven into the Great Hero Hall, Ma Ning would ride this metal car from the sky and crash heavily into the crowd of monks. Relying on the advantage of the chariot, he drove all the way to the abbot of Shaolin. And then a pair of iron palms wrapped in highly toxic material grabbed at the old abbot, a heart-piercing dragon-grabbing hand. After tearing hard, the Shaolin abbot was directly torn in half vertically. But I'm just a little curious, according to the saying that the car should have no braking device, right? Then how exactly does it run? Manually? Would that become a wheelchair? Furthermore, according to the forging technology of the Qing dynasty, how much strength does this Ma Ning have to lift such a metal car? You must know that in a few months, this thing will withstand the slashing of Chen Jinan, who is holding the giant sword. While thinking wildly in his heart, Liang Yue raised his hand and pried at the eaves of the side hall, and in a few steps he had already rushed to the roof. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, the waist knife originally held tightly in his palm was immediately transformed into a modern firearm under the sunlight. Its slender gun body was reflecting a black metallic luster, and a square muzzle brake was also installed at the front end of the long barrel. The angular design gave it a unique charm. Holding it in his hand, Liang Yue suddenly felt that his whole person seemed to be a lot color Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle, handsome, compelling. Chapter 85 8-Armed Arhat. Ka, accompanied by the crisp sound of a bullet being chambered, Liang Yue, with the utmost speed, laid down a layer of solid rock supports on the rooftop of the side hall, relying on his marksmanship honed through intense practice, and aided by advanced gunnery skills. Liang Yue at this moment didn't even need to use a scope. With a slight lift of the muzzle, he had already precisely aimed at the dung yellow person tens of meters away facing the threat of death. Moninger also demonstrated the qualities of a martial artist befitting his status as a top-tier fighter in this world. Liang Yue could confirm that throughout the entire process of handling the gun, apart from the two sounds made when loading the bullet, he hadn't made any other movements that would attract attention, but this little bit of sound was almost negligible amidst the shouts of the Qing soldiers and the cries of the Shaolin monks below. However, the instant he aimed the gun at the other party, Moninger almost immediately sensed the danger, and abruptly turned his head, his narrow eyes staring straight at him, releasing bursts of cold light. Upon seeing the firearm in Liang Yue's hand, he subconsciously raised the metal card above his head, blocking it in front of himself, assuming a posture of running away if things looked bad-tempered and refined. The intuition of a martial artist, it seems he's indeed not simple. This thought flashed through Liang Yue's mind. His eyebrows slightly raised, and then this guy unhesitatingly pulled the trigger. Bang! The muffled blast resounded all around, like a thunderclap. The moment the gun fired, Moninger on the opposite Great Hero Hall was immediately struck by a huge shock with a crisp clang. The vehicle in his hand instantly sparked and fragments flew. The tremendous force directly caused him to lose his balance, staggering backwards and crashing heavily onto the roof. At the same time, that metal card was directly shattered into more than half, flying to the side, and finally rolled off the roof, incidentally crushing several unlucky Qing soldiers. The bullet was chambered again. Liang Yue didn't say any more nonsense at this moment, adjusting the muzzle slightly. With a curve of his lips, he once again pulled the trigger at Moninger, who had already sunk half his body into the roof. Bang! In an instant, raging flames spewed from the muzzle, and the slender bullet rubbed against the air, creating intense sparks, and violently shot towards the target. With a muffled poof sound, a bloody mist instantly rose. One of Moninger's arms was instantly blown apart by the bullet. The strong penetrating force instantly destroyed half of his shoulder hidden behind his arm, and poisonous blood flowed out in streams. Moninger's so-called poison skill, which was supposed to be impervious to swords and spears, became a joke in the face of modern firearms. However, after seeing this result, Liang Yue subconsciously frowned because the bullet just now was aimed directly at the other party's head. The yellow-orange shell ejected, and Liang Yue immediately chambered another sniper bullet. At this time, Moninger had already personally experienced the power of firearms twice in a row, and his body, already half crippled, certainly didn't dare to try a third time, so he clenched his teeth tightly, and his two intact short legs immediately began to churn, desperately kicking against a roof beneath him. Tiles flying horizontally like a rainstorm. He himself, relying on the rebounding force, was about to cross the side eaves of the Great Hero Hall's roof in the blink of an eye, and escape from here. However, this Moninger probably didn't know that for an excellent gunman, calculating the target's lead was also a course that must be mastered. Liang Yue really hadn't received formal professional training in shooting skills, but such an important topic of moving target prediction, he could also explore on his own during the previous high-intensity field exercises. Bang! The third round of ammunition was fired instantly, accompanied by the thunderous ignition sound. The bullet turned into a ghostly streamer. Flashing in the air, a cloud of blood mixed with a strange smell rose in the middle, and then dissipated into the air with the wind. Main quest, hunting the court's hounds. Moninger. 118 Armed Arhat. 01 Western Region Demonic Monk. 11 Nice. Although the process wasn't very smooth, using 3 bullets to take down one person, but at least I got it done. Glancing at the system task prompt, confirming that he had taken down the big villain of this world, Liang Yue inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. Then, he flipped his sleeve, and the sniper rifle in his hand instantly disappeared, replaced by a square rock block. After a burst of manipulation, a thick rock wall was instantly built on the eaves of the side hall in front of him. Ding! A short and crisp metallic tapping sound suddenly rang out. At this moment, Liang Yue, who was originally busy with his own affairs, stretched his head out to take a look, only to see that a flying needle about 7 or 8 centimeters long had already been stuck on the stone pier in front of him at some point. However, compared to modern firearms, this needle was obviously not powerful enough. After colliding with the solid wall, It clanged and fell on the tiles of the roof. A master of hidden weapons, the 8-armed Arhat. After making this judgment, Liang Yue couldn't help but speed up the deployment of defenses under his hands again. Although he didn't know how powerful the other party's flying needles were for the time being, the fact that it could shoot in front of him meant that it posed a threat to him. On the other side, Liang Yue's sudden intervention, and the thunderous unfamiliar firearm in his hand, immediately caused the two sides of the battle, who were originally fighting fiercely, to unconsciously slow down their pace. The metal cart that had fallen from the roof earlier directly caused the few knowledgeable officials in the rear of the Qing army to change their expressions drastically. Feeling uneasy and insecure subconsciously, they raised the weapons in their hands with wary faces, and urgently avoided behind the pillars and stone railings next to the main hall, fearing that they would become someone's next sniper target. Send a team over there. Take him down for me, a roar followed, and an official with a square face and a tuft of beard under his nose waved his hand at the Qing soldiers in front of him, directing dozens of Taoder soldiers to rush towards the side hall where someone was located. However, Liang Yue had already made complete preparations at this time. The reason why he built a thick rock fortress around himself was not really to defend against the attacks of these Qing soldiers, but to prevent the ammunition firepower from being too fierce and hurting himself later. A light jingle sound. The pull ring of a steel ball hand grenade was casually thrown on the ground by Liang Yue, looking up from the crane left in front of him, watching the group of Qing soldiers below who were stupidly rushing towards him. This guy then released the safety lever of the grenade, and then silently counted down in his heart, 1, 2, 3. Have a good trip. Chapter 86. The terrifying little steel ball. Tossing the black pineapple in his hand lightly, the palm-sized object drew a graceful arc under the gaze of the people below, soaring over the Qing troops rushing towards Liang Yue. Finally, it began to fall in the center of the courtyard, and when it was about 3 meters above the ground, it suddenly exploded. Bang! Along with a dull explosion, thousands of fine sparks scattered instantly, shooting in all directions like a blooming firework, dazzling and beautiful. Puff puff puff. Swish swish. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Clang clang clang. In a burst of dense noise, the tiny steel balls instantly transformed into deadly weapons, densely covering the area, and driven by the explosion, they were impossible to defend against wherever they passed. One Qing soldier after another was forcibly pierced by the steel balls, turning into mincemeat. Large patches of blood mist rose from their bodies, instantly dyeing the entire courtyard a crimson color. For a time, the screams of the crowd were endless, filling every corner below. Appearing powerless and desperate, Liang Yue, at this moment, was crouching in his self-built rooftop stone fortress, facing the Qing army. The two full units, 180 centimeters of thick stone walls, guaranteed his own safety. However, listening to the dense rain like attacks hitting the stone wall behind him with a pop-pop sound, Liang Yue was still a little liver shaking at this moment. After a few breaths, when all the steel balls had settled and no longer possessed power, this guy stood up again, then grabbed the crenel and peeked his head out, looking towards the courtyard below, only to see that at this time, those Qing troops who were originally grimacing and rushing towards him with fearless bravery, had now turned into piles of broken flesh and blood. Large amounts of blood were seeping out of their corpses. After a while, it followed the cracks in the bluestone ground, gathering into streams of blood, slowly flowing around. Not far away, those hundreds of Qing troops who were originally gathered in front of the Great Hero Hall, still fighting against a group of Shaolin monks, had also turned into piles of minced meat. After experiencing the baptism of the steel ball grenade further away, there were also dozens of people who were injured by the flying steel balls. It was just that their location was already on the edge of the grenade's killing range. The density of the steel balls was too low, and it was not enough to directly eliminate them. But the fate of this group of people was not much better either. The sporadic steel balls that shot over could still penetrate their bodies. Some unlucky ones were even hit by the small beads into their bodies, but they couldn't come out for a time. Large swathes of Qing troops affected by the remaining power of the steel ball grenade fell to the ground in pain, wailing and screaming one after another. However, Liang Yue's attention was not on these people at this time. This guy's sight crossed over these wounded, and the still considerable number of Qing soldiers, directly focusing on the few officials who were hiding behind the crowd, using stone railings and pillars as cover. At this time, the faces of these people were very ugly. Each and every one of them looked at Liang Yue with shock, anger, and a hint of panic hidden within. But without exception, they were all unharmed. Looks like I overestimated the power of the steel ball grenade a bit, but it doesn't matter. If one isn't enough, then another one. Thinking of this, Liang Yue flipped his sleeve again, and a black pineapple of the same model as before instantly appeared in his palm with a ding-a-ling sound. The silver pull ring was thrown on the ground after releasing the safety lever. Liang Yue looked calmly at the figures of the officials in the distance, and unconsciously began to count down 1 2 go. 2 seconds later, this guy suddenly swung his arm around and threw the grenade in his hand out. For a time, this black pineapple, only the size of a palm, became the focus of everyone's attention, whether it was the large group of Qing troops below, the officials hiding behind the pillars and giving orders in horror, or the monks who had retreated into the Great Hero Hall to protect themselves. They all cast their attention on it under the collective gaze of everyone. The grenade flew spinning to its apex, then slowly fell, slowly flying to the most densely populated place. What the hell are you all standing there for? Why aren't you running away? One of the officials stood up at this time and roared at the crowd standing there blankly, then hid back behind the pillar again. When the Qing soldiers heard this, they immediately reacted and rushed in all directions like a group of elementary school students after school. The abbot of Shaolin Temple also reacted quickly at this time, and immediately ordered the martial monks at the entrance of the hall to close the door quickly. Unfortunately, before they could completely close it, dozens of Qing soldiers who were closer immediately poured in, and at this moment of life and death, they all erupted with potential, howling and breaking through their defenses. Bang! Subsequently, the grenade exploded in the air directly above the crowd, and large patches of small steel balls burst out in all directions like a celestial maiden scattering flowers like a sudden torrential rain. The angles were tricky, covering all directions, making it impossible to defend against. Puff 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 puff. In a series of sounds of sharp weapons entering flesh, the main force of the Qing army suddenly fell in patches, turning into large piles of minced meat, blood flowing horizontally, and broken bones flying. Desperate howls merged into one at this moment. The sacred place of Zen Buddhism was transformed into human hell in an instant. Large plumes of blood mist rose from the courtyard, and a strong bloody smell permeated the entire line of sight. After a few breaths, Liang Yue stretched his head out from behind his fortress again, silently observing everyone below. After scanning the bodies of those who could still stand, he very easily locked onto the figures of the few people wearing official uniforms among them. Then, this guy flipped his sleeve, and a sniper rifle appeared in his palm. Silently placing the gun on the stone pier in front of him, Liang Yue began to snipe the figures one by one. Bang! Click click bang! Click click bang! Click click. Taking advantage of the moment when the crowd below was terrified to the point of losing their minds, several officials were quickly shot in the head by Liang Yue. However, just as this guy turned his gun to try to complete his work, the remaining figure suddenly woke up, dodging left and right, and moving around. Relying on the lightness skill that surprised Liang Yue, he even dodged several of his sniper bullets. Finally, with a lunge and a leap, he directly entered a small alley between two side halls, disappearing without a trace. Main quest, U003 CU003 Chunting the Court's Dogs U003 EU003 Emaninger 118 Armed Arhat 01 Western Region Demon Monk 11 Court Dogs 7 Tisk. That guy is really slippery. Chapter 87. I am Wang Yi, and I pay my respects to the old abbot. After the opponent escaped, Liang Yue didn't try to chase after him, because from the 8 armed Arhat's unintentional display of movement techniques, he could judge that he was definitely not the opponent in close combat. Forcing a pursuit would only be self-humiliating and add to his troubles. Liang Yue's current advantage lies in long-range attacks based on modern firearms, area of effect firepower, and the unlimited terrain construction advantages of his mid-game character let him snipe from the rooftops and play tower defense games. That's fine, but once he leaves these 3 magic weapons behind, when facing the close combat, weapon fighting, and hidden weapon assaults that others have painstakingly honed for half their lives, this guy will naturally suffer. So, after seeing the only threat on the field escape, Liang Yue decisively chose his best field, took out his pistol from his storage space, and started playing stationary headshots on the rooftop against the surviving Qing soldiers. Of course, as the main victims of this incident, the Shaolin Temple and its monks obviously didn't want to let these remnants go. After all, they were almost forced into a desperate situation by these Qing soldiers and completely annihilated here. Therefore, facing the Qing soldiers who had managed to escape from the courtyard, the old abbot of Shaolin was now personally directing his monks to hunt them down. After that, the old monk cautiously greeted Liang Yue, who was slowly walking towards the main hall. I am Wang Yi. Greetings to the old abbot. Thank you, righteous man Wang Yi, for saving my Shaolin lineage. If it weren't for the righteous man's help today, my Shaolin's 1,000-year-old Chan sect would probably have been wiped out by those taters. The old monk was very sensible at this time, and as soon as they met, He put his hands together and bowed deeply to him. Looking at the other party's old face with a full white beard, Liang Yue quickly returned the salute. Then, this guy threw away the hat on his head, grabbed the dusty Qing army uniform and yanked it hard, immediately revealing his young face. However, the high bun and the cyan black Taoist robe on his body immediately made the old abbot's eyes light up. So you are a young talent from the Taoist Zunman. This old monk is being polite. From the other party's sparkling eyes, Liang Yue knew that the old monk must have thought a lot of things in his mind at this moment. For example, a Buddhist-Taoist alliance, working together for a great cause or something, but out of respect for the anti-Qing people as an outsider. Liang Yue felt that it was necessary to clarify things with the other party and dispel his illusions as soon as possible. Abbot, you misunderstand. I am not a member of the Zunman. This dress is just a disguise because I don't like the Qing court's rules. So, young hero Wang Yi is just like us. A brave man who opposes the Qing and restores the Ming. Looking at the increasingly bright light in the old monk's eyes, Liang Yue was helpless for a while, so he had to say modestly, Master, you are too kind. Haha, this is not the place to talk, brave man. Please follow me to the clean room for a chat. I would rather obey than decline. In the following time, Liang Yue had an in-depth and frank discussion with the old abbot in a quiet meditation room. Besides exchanging pleasantries about the grace of rescue, the two also talked about many topics. For example, ideals, such as the future, about national crisis, about saving the country, about the suffering of the people, about expelling the Tartars and restoring China. To be honest, although he was a little unwilling to listen to the other party's preaching, some of the old monk's ideas were indeed in line with Liang Yue's appetite, so much so that in some brief moments, he almost thought that the person sitting in front of him was not a Shaolin abbot who was far away from the world and devoted himself to Buddhist studies, but a general who had led his troops on the battlefield to resist foreign invaders. This time, if it weren't for the strong support of young hero Wang Yi, my Shaolin lineage would have been cut off, and this 1,000-year-old Chan temple would have been turned into scorched earth. However, after experiencing this disaster, we monks can no longer cultivate on Mount Shaoxi. Otherwise, the Qing court's army will surely attack again soon. Alice, young hero Wang Yi has a great kindness to my Shaolin, and this old monk will never forget it. The Shaolin lineage will also keep it in mind. Before we go south, I wonder if the young hero has anything you need us to do. After talking for nearly an hour, the monks outside probably even made the meal. The old abbot finally got to the point. At this time, Liang Yue was overjoyed when he heard this. He had come with a purpose, so he would naturally not be polite. So he subconsciously rubbed his hands and said bluntly, to be honest, I want a cultivation method that can help me cultivate. Master should have already seen that the reason why I was able to eliminate those Qing court soldiers before it's just relying on some external objects, such as machinery and firearms. I still have to thank the Shaolin monks for containing them. If I were to face those tatars alone, it would be really difficult to win. Ha 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 ha. Young hero Wang Yi is being humble. With a young hero's ability, even without my Shaolin monks, I'm afraid you can still successfully defeat the enemy. However, since the young hero has made a request, this old monk will naturally not disappoint the young hero. As he said that, the old monk turned around and walked to a seemingly ordinary brick wall in the clean room, and gently tapped it a few times according to a unique rhythm. Then the wall miraculously opened a stone slab from the side. The old monk reached out and took out a wooden box from inside, and then placed it in front of Liang Yue, opened the lid of the box, revealing a few old books inside. My Shaolin has 4 divine skills handed down from Bodhidharma, the founder: marrow washing, tendon transformation, virgin, and golden bell. However, things change with the times, and it is impossible to be perfect of these 4 divine skills. The marrow washing sutra has long been lost, only half of the tendon transformation sutra remains, and the virgin skill is still considered complete. But this old monk observes that the young hero is no longer a virgin. As for the golden bell cover, only some basic body refining methods remain, and the corresponding inner cultivation methods have long been destroyed. If young hero Wang Yi doesn't mind, please choose one of these 3 scriptures. Chapter 88: The Golden Bell. After leaving the Shaolin Temple, Liang Yue rode his horse north. After several inquiries, he finally arrived in Beijing, the capital of the Qing dynasty. After a week of twists and turns, on the way, this fellow was not just burying his head in the journey. Whenever he passed through towns and cities, he would stay for a short period of time. In addition to purchasing some unique little trinkets in this ancient society, the upgrade mission of the stronghold world was naturally also within his planning scope. Some common species, such as mountain chickens, wild ducks, wild rabbits, pigeons, quails, and domestic geese, and Chinese pastoral dogs could be easily bought in the markets. He passed even some less common prey, such as cranes, snakes, deer, roe deer, leopards, tigers, badgers, pangolins, and even various birds, etc. When he passed through larger cities, he could also find them in some more secretive novelty shops. Liang Yue, being new to the place, naturally didn't know where these underground black markets were located, but as the saying goes, money makes the mare go. If he really wanted to find them, he only needed to spend some silver in some taverns and restaurants with a large flow of people, and ask a clever waiter, and he would be sure to find out the details. In fact, in ancient society, it was a common social custom for some dignitaries, officials, and even merchants with relatively large businesses to keep various exotic animals and collect various flowers, birds, fish, and insects. It's just that, at this time, it was the early years of Kangxi, and the social environment in China was not too stable. So there were not many trading places for such rare beasts and birds, but even so, the prototype of this functional market has already appeared in various places aside from those dignitaries, even some of the more well-known temples and Taoist temples in various places. In order to increase the interest and leisure in their venues, these worldly people often keep a group of geese, cranes, macaques, civet cats, sika deer, turtles, and even various spiritual and ornamental fish in some specific places to show their philosophy of being indifferent to the world. When Liang Yue left the Shaolin Temple, he had taken away a batch of such rare animals from the backyard of these monks, which needed to be taken care of by special personnel. Species diversity, animal chapter, current collection number 387. In addition to collecting these diverse animals, most of Liang Yue's energy on this trip was naturally focused on the cultivation of his kung fu, except for the current new Shaolin 5 Ancestors plane. In other martial arts worlds, as long as there is an organization like Shaolin Temple, it is also very famous, even though the old monk only had half of it left in his hand. For Liang Yue, whose actual age has entered 17 and whose bones have almost been finalized, the greatest function of this method is actually to help him perform yijin marrow washing, cleanse his body, and build the foundation for his own cultivation, so that the meridians in his body become reactivated. Secondly, it is to rely on this yijin jing to perform exercises in luck, and cultivate internal force, and even true energy, the exclusive energy of the martial arts field. However, these original thoughts were actually just Liang Yue's wishful thinking when the old abbot put the 3 sets of secrets in the wooden box in front of him and let him choose, even though this fellow had already envisioned a bunch of coquettish operations in his heart. Just as he was about to make a decision, Liang Yue subconsciously asked the system for its opinion. Originally, he didn't expect the system to give any constructive feedback. After all, that thing was too aloof, unless necessary. It usually didn't pay much attention to him. What Liang Yue didn't expect was that the system actually gave him a lot of face for his inquiry. This time he directly told him to choose the golden bell cover. In this regard, Liang Yue naturally did not let go of this opportunity to communicate, and quickly exchanged the doubts in his heart with the system. The final answer he got was that his physique was naturally special, and he didn't need to go through the marrow washing of the yijin jing to perform normal exercises in luck, and the remaining half of the yijin jing itself has been seriously missing in the method of performing exercises in luck, and it is not enough for him to complete normal basic cultivation. In comparison, although the golden bell cover seems to be more incomplete, this kung fu itself has a good body refining effect, and it is of the greatest help to him. In this regard, Liang Yue did not refute anything. After all, the system would definitely not harm him, although he himself doesn't like this kind of martial arts that is specially trained to be beaten. From a practical point of view, the system's choice of the golden bell cover is indeed the best option at the moment. As for the most complete boy kung fu, not to mention that this fellow Liang Yue is no longer a boy, to put it another way, even if he is, then he will definitely not choose this kung fu to practice. After all, once you practice boy kung fu, to put it bluntly, it's like asking someone to be a eunuch, and you can't give up halfway, otherwise, it will be a complete waste of previous efforts, and it will be difficult to make any further progress. They are also eunuch-like kung fu. Liang Yue feels that the reputation and return rate of that thing is not as good as letting him practice Sunflower Treasure or Evil Sword Manual. At least, those 2 kung fu can be quickly completed, and once you practice them, you can also gain a ghostly body speed after performing a series of flying needles. From the effect point of view, it is definitely more reliable than boy kung fu. The medicinal materials are almost used up. I have to go to the pharmacy in time to replenish them, otherwise I'm afraid I won't be able to take a medicinal bath tonight. Leading the jujube red horse beside him, Liang Yue was lining up at this time, waiting for the inspection of the city gate guards. While still considering his next plan in his mind compared to a week ago, there seemed to be some new changes in him at this time, in addition to the trace of maturity in his eyebrows that was born under the open air and the ancient humanities and customs. Judging from the appearance alone, Liang Yu's skin color at this time seemed to have become a little darker than before. Looking closely, from his hands, neck, and face exposed in the air, there seemed to be a faint luster hanging on them. This is naturally not because Liang Yue has achieved some success after practicing the golden bell cover for a week, so that the power is revealed to the outside. In fact, this so-called luster is the layer of glaze plated on his body when this fellow is carrying out a corresponding medicinal bath according to the secret method recorded in the Golden Bell Cover secret book. I don't know if the substance mixed in the prescription has some kind of corrosiveness. Anyway, according to the frequency of taking a bath every other day, Liang Yue has become like this in just 1 week. No matter how he takes a bath towel at any time, and cooperates with daily chemical products such as soap and shower gel, he can't shed it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Peking Plan. Next, hurry up, little Taoist, what are you, a member of the clergy, doing in the capital? This humble Taoist travels here and there, observing the celestial signs at night. I see that the aura of the Son of Heaven in the capital of our dynasty is becoming increasingly strong. I have come to admire the majesty of the sage. I'm asking you what you're doing in the capital. Don't play riddles with your grandpa. This humble Taoist has studied with a master for many years and knows some skills in drawing talismans and divination. Therefore, I wanted to come to the capital to see if there is any business to be done. Come to the capital to do talisman drawing and divination business? Oh. That horse of yours is quite handsome. It doesn't look cheap, does it? My master passed away a little over a month ago. This is the horse that this humble Taoist raised from a young age in the temple. It is also the only thing I received from the temple. Which Taoist temple are you from? Tell your grandpa soldier here. When I followed the Tezu Emperor in the southern and northern wars, I might have even been there before. This humble Taoist is from the White Cloud Temple in Shaanxi, but that is just a small, secluded temple in the countryside. This is my Taoist certificate. Please take a look, officer. He took a booklet that he bought from the black market with money and proactively handed it to the city gate guard, who was deliberately making things difficult for him. At the same time, in order to get through the gate faster, Liang Yue also stuffed a piece of silver at the bottom of the booklet as a bribe. After glancing at the soldier next to him, who was holding a portrait and constantly comparing it to himself and the crowd behind him, Liang Yue stood there obediently, waiting for the city gate guard to let him pass. Sure enough, after handing over the silver, the inspecting guard's expression immediately softened a lot, and he no longer acted so officious as before. After turning his head and exchanging a glance with the soldier behind him who was comparing the portrait, he quickly led him into the city. Before long, Liang Yue was leading a horse and staying at an inn. The location of this inn was a bit remote, but it was cheap, and the guests who came and went were mostly peddlers, porters, and petty merchants who didn't have much money. However, this was also very much in line with someone's identity of coming to the capital to make a living afterwards. Liang Yue used the excuse of renting a house and shop to wander through the streets and alleys of the capital, constantly familiarizing himself with the surrounding terrain. Occasionally, he would also enter some pharmacies to purchase some medicinal herbs, both to disguise himself and to keep them, as in fact, since entering the city, Liang Yue had quickly noticed something was amiss around him. With his keen senses, before long, some small hooligans appeared in his vicinity, and then they followed him slowly, seemingly casually, occasionally raising their heads to look at him a few times. Observing his every move, Liang Yue understood that he was being targeted, but after discovering this situation, he didn't say anything, just let it go, let nature take its course, and planned to decide based on the subsequent development of the situation. However, in Liang Yue's heart, he had some guesses about the origins of these people. The capital is indeed a place of virtue. Although it seems to be becoming more peaceful and the people are living in peace, the imperial court's surveillance of the people has never stopped. But that's right. At this time, the 3 feudatories within the country and the Zhang family in Taiwan have not yet been pacified. Externally, there are troops from the grasslands and plateaus watching from the sidelines. If they really relax their vigilance, the Manchu's reign would probably not last long. Moreover, these people seem to have never intended to integrate into this land. They just placed themselves in the position of herdsmen, constantly squeezing the people, and once the situation is not right, they are ready to run back north at any time. However, those head servants who help them herd are really amazing. Not only did they do the booyah with relish and gratitude, but later they even helped their masters to revitalize the game. Liang Yue's current plan was actually very simple, which was to specifically plan his course of action based on the content of the system's mission. After experiencing the battle at the Shaolin Temple, 2 of the 3 must-kill quotas in the main quest have now been killed by him. More importantly, Moninger's premature death caused the side quest of protecting Chen Jinan, the chief helmsman of the Heaven and Earth Society, to inevitably undergo unknown deviations without this nemesis, although he didn't know whether Chen Jinan would still be as foolish as in the original plot. Rushing up alone against a group of people and then being instantly killed. But what Liang Yue knew was that relying solely on the 8-armed Arhat, who excelled in hidden weapons and lightness skills, would definitely not be able to defeat Chen Duozu. An already elderly thousand-hand Guanyin, Zhu Xiaoqian, could kill the opponent in a fair one-on-one duel. Not to mention that without Moninger's harassment, Hong Ziguan and others would join Chen Jinan unscathed, and the old abbot of Shaolin Temple would lead the remaining Shaolin monks to join the great cause of opposing the Qing and restoring the Ming. Of course, the masters who have defected to the Qing court will definitely not only be Moninger, the western region's demon monk, and the 8-armed Arhat. After losing the former 2, there may be even more powerful replacements coming up later. And for Liang Yue, instead of following the Heaven and Earth Society people to hide everywhere, and being exhausted by dealing with the encirclement of the Imperial Court's hounds, it would be better to simply take the initiative and run directly to the Qing Court's base camp to attract the attention of all kinds of hounds anyway, with the protagonist's halo surrounding Brother Ji, and the protection of the Shaolin monks, plus the original masters in the Heaven and Earth Society. If it's just to ensure Chen Jinan's safety, it shouldn't be a big problem. The current problem is how to gather the Imperial Court's hounds. Scattered all over the country, participating in the annihilation of the Heaven and Earth Society, and all kinds of rebellious forces, to this beeping city make trouble. And make it bigger, the bigger the better, and it has to be so big that the army within the capital is helpless and can only summon those professionals to come back to deal with me. As the saying goes, shoot the man, shoot the horse first, capture the thief, capture the king first. The little emperor should be kept for now. But there's no need to consider so much about those princes of the same clan as him. Also, where are the barracks of the Tartar clan army stationed in the capital? These all need to be carefully planned. Just thinking about it nonsensically in his heart, Liang Yue had already sat down in a restaurant, ordered a plate of dried fruit and 2 side dishes, and was eating slowly. The restaurant in front of him couldn't be considered very high-end, but it was located in a densely populated area of the capital. There was indeed a lot of traffic back and forth, and the prices here were relatively affordable, so the business in the restaurant was very prosperous. Near lunchtime, the store was gradually filled with diners from all walks of life. After taking a few sips of wine, people would often talk loudly, although most of them were trivial matters, small things about family affairs. Occasionally there would be some rumors and legends from the Jianghu. Liang Yue liked this kind of occasion very much. In addition to being able to experience the social atmosphere and life of this time up close, he could also gather some information. Chapter 90: Unreliable Folk Rumors. Old Wang, have you heard the news? Heard what? Old Li, what trivial matter do you have to amuse everyone with again? This time it's no trivial matter, but a big deal. I guarantee you'll all be so shocked, your teeth will fall out. What big deal? Tell us quickly. Yeah, hurry up. To tell it, naturally there's no problem, but alright, we know you. Waiter, a plate of peanuts, and 2 ounces of sorghum wine. Okay, please wait a moment. Now is that good enough? Tell us quickly if there's anything big, and if you dare to brag, believe it or not, tomorrow I'll have your wife make me a special meal. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the restaurant immediately reached a climax, and a burst of laughter echoed throughout the hall. Soon, after a group of acquaintances joked and cursed for a while, the man called Old Li finally began to tell the big event in his mouth. This story goes that a few days ago, the Imperial Court sent a large army to the foot of Songshan Shaoxi Mountain. Obviously, the news of the Imperial Court sending troops to attack the Shaolin Temple had already begun to spread from the Songshan area to all directions. However, this time, due to Liang Yue's intervention, the once fierce Tartar army ended in failure. At the beginning of the founding of the dynasty, the Qing Court's troops, who prided themselves on their excellent combat power, actually returned in defeat when attacking a Jianghu sect, and the final casualties were extremely heavy. Just imagine how much shock this news would cause in the Jianghu, and even throughout the entire Huaxia territory. Although the Shaolin Temple has always been famous, and in the past dynasties, it has mostly been able to sit firmly in the top 3 positions in the Jianghu martial arts world. However, the Shaolin Temple is, after all, a Jianghu sect, at best. It has a little more religious element than ordinary sects, whether it is from the perspective of human resources, equipment supply, training level, or even the quantity. The monks are far worse than the Qing court, which controls the entire country. But even under such a disparity of power, the imperial court still lost. According to Liang Yue's personal verification, it was confirmed that only the 8-armed Arhat seemed to be the only one who was able to escape from that group of Qing soldiers. In the end, this kind of thing is definitely a huge blow to the prestige of the Qing court and for those ambitious people who are determined to overthrow the Qing dynasty and restore the Ming dynasty, or to establish their own independent regime by overthrowing the Tartars. It is an encouragement along the way. Liang Yue could hear rumors about this incident in almost every town and city he passed through, from Henan to Hebei. However, under the influence of the saying that 3 men make a tiger, the original incident of hundreds of Qing soldiers attacking the Shaolin Temple has gradually changed its flavor with the passage of time, and has begun to become more and more mysterious. The number of Qing troops sent by the imperial court has also increased from the initial hundreds of people to thousands, and then from thousands of people to tens of thousands. Liang Yue once saw a person in a small city only 1 day away from the capital, patting his chest and guaranteeing to the people around him. He said that he had personally witnessed that, facing the siege of tens of thousands of Qing troops, at the critical moment, the abbot of Shaolin Temple soared into the air, wrapped in supreme power, and used a Tathagata palm from above the 9 heavens, directly killing the imperial court's thousands of troops and horses on Shaoxi Mountain. Now standing at the foot of the mountain, you can still see the huge palm print on the hillside, and so on. Liang Yue felt that, according to this rate of spread, it is estimated that it will not be long before the old monk will become a Buddha on the spot, and be enshrined at home by some people who do not know the truth as the Buddha's descent. Of course, in these unreliable folk ballad-style legends, Liang Yue has also made a grand appearance. However, in these stories, he is described in a spring and autumn brushwork as a majestic image with a height of 9 feet, a tiger's back and a bear's waist, beard and hair all stretched out, and a red face with angry eyes. He is simply a combination of Guan Yu and Zhang Fei in the world. The modern military fire he used has been said to be the Moji mechanism technique inherited from ancient times, with unparalleled power, or even more mysterious powers such as controlling thunder and lightning. People with a little insight will naturally not be confused by this kind of rumor, but from the signal released by the common people, they can also understand some intriguing trends and ideas. It can be imagined that, with the spread of this incident in the Jianghu, the Shaolin Temple will naturally be pushed to the forefront, whether it is for the sake of its own face, or to extinguish the rising momentum of reactionary forces. The Qing court will inevitably use all means to wipe out the Shaolin martial monks who fled to the south as soon as possible. It seems that a monk's journey should not be peaceful. Those rumors about me, except for the escaped 8-armed Arhat, only the Shaolin Temple people know about them. As the court's lackeys, they will naturally not help me with any publicity. Moreover, the 8-armed Arhat has never seen my real body, so these rumors about me should have been deliberately spread by the old monks. Right, this is also good. It can save me a lot of trouble. For example, the Qing court's Manchu Guards camp is stationed in an open area in the western suburbs outside the city, a full 40,000 elite troops. You must know that when the Qing army entered the customs, the entire Manchu formal army was only more than 80,000, less than 90,000. Nowadays, in order to cope with the folk uprisings in various places, as well as the Sanfan forces such as Wu Sangui who hold their own troops, the Qing court has to divide its troops everywhere, and then recruit troops and buy horses to expand its military strength on a large scale. But even so, under this situation, the imperial court still maintains the inheritance system of the Manchu 8 Banners army, and the purity of this team itself. This tradition has even been maintained until the last moment of the demise of my Qing dynasty. From this point of view, it can also be seen that they have never taken the Han people seriously from beginning to end, even if they had to rely on Han officials due to external environmental pressures later. But in times of crisis, they can still make the decision to rather give it to foreign countries than to slaves. In addition to those pure Manchu 8 Banners armies, in the current capital city, there are also various puppet troops and newly recruited green camp soldiers stationed there, but Liang Yue doesn't take them too seriously. If I can find an opportunity to wipe out the 40,000 troops, will the situation in Beijing, and even the entire Huaxia, change drastically immediately? Chapter 91 Step by Step. Over the next 3 days, Liang Yue didn't make any rash moves. Aside from wandering around Beiping City all day, familiarizing himself with the terrain of each area, and purchasing some unique fish, birds, and small animals as pets. His biggest act was probably renting a temporary small courtyard in the western part of the city, near the city walls, for which he paid a rental fee for half a year. As the saying goes, it's not easy to live in the capital. Faced with this considerable sum of money, Liang Yue himself felt a pang of heartache for a while, and his displeasure was written all over his face. Even the standard of his meals and drinks while out and about was invisibly lowered. Of course, this so-called displeasure was just for the benefit of the few small-time gangsters who were responsible for monitoring him secretly. Liang Yue himself naturally didn't care about this expense, and even if he ate a little worse outside, he would give himself extra meals after returning home in the following days. This guy settled down in the capital, at least, that's how it seemed to the surrounding neighbors and villagers. Apart from the occasional scent of herbs wafting from his courtyard, the people around him hardly noticed anything unusual. But then again, for a Taoist priest, isn't it perfectly normal in the eyes of others to be tinkering with these mysterious herbs all day long, doing things related to alchemy and seeking gods? However, in secret, Liang Yue was actually not so honest. Especially when night fell, this guy would quietly take out his small hoe and begin a whole night of hard work extending from the ground to the underground, digging from inside the city to outside the city, from dusk to dawn. In the process, this guy even had the leisure to send a nest of small mice, weasels, and other unexpected gains into his own stronghold world. During the day, Liang Yue would soak in a medicated bath, finish practicing his golden bell shield, and then wander around the capital with the scent of herbs on his body, before returning home to continue working when the sun set. Thus, this life of resting at sunrise and working at sunset continued for 7 whole days. At this point, even with Liang Yue's extraordinary physical fitness, plus the blessing of the main character, it was starting to become a little unsustainable. As a result, Liang Yue occasionally appeared dazed and yawned frequently these past few days. Fortunately, the wool bed, a special product of the world, came in handy at this time. After a solid sleep, this guy became lively again on the 8th day that Liang Yue was ignored by the small-time gangsters of the capital, which was also the morning of the 11th day since he came to this capital city. On this day, after a whole night of rest, Liang Yue got up early from bed, and while preparing the medicated bath, he began his routine basic training of the Golden Bell Shield. After more than half a month of accumulation and exploration, with the help of the system, Liang Yue had gradually grasped the essence of this shale and secret skill. Liang Yue strength: 33 agility, 44 constitution, 43 energy, 55 bloodline, human, sealed, talents, vigorous spirit, affinity skills, language proficiency, skip shot, conditions not met, not activated, advanced gunmanship proficiency, basic swordsmanship, observation abilities, simple tool making, game character cultivation method, Golden Bell Shield, basic, level 1-3 current level 1A defensive technique inherited from Bodhidharma, the founder of Shaolin, with the effect of strengthening the body and enhancing the defender's defense. Cultivation method effect: defense plus 137 strength plus 3 agility plus 2 constitution plus 8 proficiency. 47-100. With the help of the system, Liang Yue's cultivation progress has been going very smoothly since obtaining the secret manual of this incomplete cultivation method. He had already opened a new cultivation method entry in his character attribute interface after just flipping through it once, and left the mark of the Golden Bell Shield on it. After more than half a month of persistent cultivation and the cooperation of medicated baths, Liang Yue's cultivation progress was steadily improving, and his understanding of the Golden Bell Shield was gradually becoming more and more handy. It is worth mentioning that although this Golden Bell Shield cultivation method appeared in the form of data on Liang Yue's character interface with the help of the system, however, the specific attributes of this cultivation method are not immutable. As Liang Yue's practice deepened and the proficiency of the cultivation method steadily increased, the specific values it displayed and the additional attribute bonuses it gave him were also slowly changing. Even within the same level, there is a big difference between just entering the door and gradually improving. After more than half a month, my skin has really become more resilient, and the elasticity of my muscles has also increased a bit. It seems that there has been a real improvement in defense. However, that mere 100 points of defense doesn't seem to be as effective as wearing a leather armor directly. The biggest gain after practicing this Golden Bell Shield is the enhancement of my constitution. The training effect that had been slowly decreasing has now started to accelerate again. My muscles are tight, and even my mobility has improved a lot. Sure enough, just like the system said before, although this Golden Bell Shield is severely incomplete, It is the most helpful to me at the moment." With a whoosh, Liang Yue jumped out of the large medicinal barrel and landed steadily on the ground with a beautiful front flip, feeling the more compact muscles all over his body. A sense of fulfillment suddenly arose from the bottom of his heart. Afterward, Liang Yue stood there stark naked, subconsciously moving his hands and feet. And finally simply did a set of calisthenics to stretch his body. The soaking in the medicated bath doesn't mean that you just have to immerse yourself entirely in the special potion during this bathing process. Additional movements and exercises are also required. Just like Indian yoga, you must maintain specific and twisted postures to increase the absorption rate of the medicinal effect by your muscles and bones. In addition, after soaking in the medicated bath, he also had to continue to cooperate with a set of special fitness boxing techniques, constantly tempering his body to promote the effectiveness of the medicine in his body. The set of boxing techniques recorded in the Golden Bell Shield is relatively clumsy. It seems that it does not have much lethality, and there are almost no moves that require shouting to help during the training process. Even the posture, in his own opinion, has a bit of the meaning of clumsy dance. The entire training process emphasizes the inner strength and the round and soft movements, but Liang Yue didn't dare to underestimate these things at all. Think about the ancient Muay Thai movements that have been handed down in the real world, and the set of worship rituals that Muay Thai fighters perform before each duel. In the eyes of people who don't know the ropes, those movements are also a bit clumsy, but it is this kind of rather primitive training idea that has created the prestigious reputation of Muay Thai throughout the world, and this body refining technique itself seeks to act on the practitioner himself, rather than a way to defeat the enemy. Liang Yue can naturally distinguish this point. Chapter 92 Little Blue Pills. After about an hour and a half, Liang Yue finally stopped his almost silent training mode. He was panting heavily, his chest rising and falling violently, and his almost perfect physique had turned completely red, looking like a freshly boiled prawn. His whole body was surging with heat, and the remaining faint medicinal fragrance was being discharged from his body along with the steam as his pores contracted and expanded. Creak. Then, Liang Yue opened the door and walked into the courtyard, allowing the winter chill to dissipate the heat from his body. It took him a full half-hour for his body to return to its usual wheat color. Faint traces of gray matter had unknowingly solidified into clumps on his skin since he began practicing the basic form of the Golden Bell Shield. This phenomenon of expelling impurities and removing dirt had accompanied Liang Yue, and after each training session, this filth would emerge from his body. Although this phenomenon was far from the legendary opportunities of washing marrow and reshaping bones, for Liang Yue, the feeling of experiencing himself gradually becoming stronger, as he was now, was quite good. Returning to the house, he washed his body again and sent the remnants from the medicinal bucket into the stronghold world, where they mixed with a patch of lava and turned into stone and obsidian. Then, the fellow took out a pile of meat cakes, fruits, eggs, milk, and other things from his storage space and devoured them ravenously. As the saying goes, poor scholars, rich warriors. Liang Yue felt that this empirical summary of the ancients was really too correct, not to mention the large amounts of various high-calorie, high-protein foods he needed to consume for his daily 3 meals. Just the cost of the medicinal herbs he needed for his medicinal baths every other day was enough. After a month, without 100 taels of silver as a base, it would definitely be difficult to sustain, and at this rate of spending, even some wealthy families probably couldn't afford it. Liang Yue really couldn't imagine how the monks of the Shaolin Temple could practice this Golden Bell Shield divine skill without being able to eat meat. After finishing this rich breakfast, the fellow dressed neatly as usual, locked the doors and windows, and then slowly headed towards the city area. But before he could take 2 steps, he saw a middle-aged man with a face full of walking towards him. At this time, the man's face was flushed, he was humming a little tune, and he was carrying a piece of pork with blood on it, looking like he was in a good mood. This man was Liang Yue's landlord, and his occupation seemed to be a pig butcher. The small courtyard he was currently living in was the other party's property. No, I have to go out and find a livelihood. I can't just sit at home and eat my fill, can I? That's right. Hey, by the way, I used to smell a medicinal scent coming from your yard. Quickly tell me, are you refining some kind of Taoist elixir inside? Hey brother Liu, you're joking. How can there be any elixir in this world? I just tinkered with some small things myself, for fun. Saying that, Liang Yue reached out and took out a small brown porcelain bottle from his sleeve pocket. Then, under the other party's eager gaze, he carefully poured out a rhombus-shaped blue pill. See, this is the result of my efforts during this period. Your pill looks quite exquisite, but what is its effect? Looking at the pill in his palm, the middle-aged man subconsciously swallowed and asked. Seeing this, the corners of Liang Yue's mouth immediately curved into a smile, and then he put on a knowing look and whispered to the other party after eating it, "It can make a man more powerful in bed, Does this medicine work?" Hearing this, the guy immediately revealed a look of realization, and then hurriedly certified to him mysteriously, "It definitely works. I guarantee it with my own credibility. I'll give this one to Brother Liu for you to try it out. How about it?" Taoist priest Liang is generous. "Hey, are there any taboos when taking this medicine? Swallow it about 2/4 of an hour before the act, but my medicine is just for fun. Although there are no side effects, it can't strengthen the foundation and cultivate the vitality, so you can't eat it often, so as not to overconsume. Says it's so powerful. HMPH, hurry up, give me more. This medicine of mine is not easy to refine, and I don't have much stock on hand. Tisk. Are you trying to pull this trick on me? Tell me, how much does it cost to sell? If you mention money, this matter will be vulgar. How about this? Seeing that Brother Liu usually takes care of me, I will give you 2 more. Then I'll be grateful." After saying goodbye to the other party, just after passing by, the smile on Liang Yu's face immediately subsided, his eyebrows narrowed slightly, and a trace of sarcasm flashed in the depths of his eyes. Similarly, not long after Liang Yu left, the figure of the middle-aged man appeared in a hidden alley nearby at this time. In addition to him, there were 2 other roguelike figures here. If Liang Yu was here at this time, he would definitely recognize the identities of the other party. These 2 were the 2 who were responsible for monitoring him some time ago. After the 3 gathered together, they began to whisper. After a while, 2 of the blue pills in the middle-aged man's hand reached the hands of the other 2. A day quickly passed. After eating dinner, Liang Yu subconsciously looked at the darkening sky outside, and then closed the courtyard door tightly. He practiced boxing in the courtyard at a leisurely pace, until the night was completely dark, and the surroundings were so dark that he couldn't see his fingers. Then he slowly stopped and returned to the house, and then blew out the lights, listening carefully for a while. Then he flipped his sleeve and took out an iron pickaxe from the storage space. With a few quick strokes, he dug up a floor tile in the corner, revealing a dark passage below. The fellow then jumped in, and then blocked the entrance from below, and the room suddenly fell into silence in the long tunnel. Liang Yu was holding a torch at this time, rushing forward all the way along the only direction of the tunnel. After walking for more than half an hour, the fellow reached the end of the tunnel, taking out the iron shovel from the storage space again. After a burst of knocking, he came to a vast underground space that was almost impossible to see. The edge of the surrounding walls, as well as the inverted oil on the top of the space, were densely packed with torches, illuminating the entire space brightly. Taking a closer look, next to the torches, there seemed to be many black things placed at this time. These objects were connected to each other by wires, and were unified and aggregated to a lever next to the tunnel entrance. Liang Yu looked up at the situation above at this time, and a sense of accomplishment suddenly arose in his heart. The bombs are all installed, but to be on the safe side, it's best to dig this space deeper, so that even if someone is lucky enough not to be blown to death, falling into the bottom of this hole will at least be half crippled. Chapter 93: The Beginning of Chaos. After a period of frantic, tireless work, Liang Yu finally stopped digging. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he rolled up his sleeve and checked the preset electronic watch. Then, the fellow returned to the entrance of the tunnel and tapped a few times on the electronic screen next to the lever, setting the countdown to 1 hour. Liang Yu casually pressed the lever, and the time began to tick down second by second. Turning back to take another look at the deep space behind him, a wicked smile suddenly appeared on his face. Then, he followed the path he had come from, walking back unhurriedly. As he walked, he kept summoning the small cube of earth in his hand, constantly filing in the tunnel behind him. After about 40 more minutes, Liang Yu returned to his residence. He carefully observed the entrance, and after confirming that no one had been there, he came out with a relaxed expression. He barred the passage in the room, subconsciously smelled the earthy smell on his body, then took off his gear and threw it directly into the stronghold world, and took out a new Taoist robe and placed it on the bed. He himself plunged into the bathtub, comfortably soaking in the endless water source of the stronghold world. Boom. Boom boom. Boom. About 10 minutes later, a series of dull and violent explosions suddenly rang out outside the West City. Liang Yu, who lived nearby, felt the power of the explosion almost immediately. Under the ravages of waves of explosives, the ground began to shake violently. On the roof made of beams and tiles above his head, dust kept falling, mixed with various small stones. Instantly, Liang Yu, who had just washed himself clean, was covered in dust, but at this moment he was not in a hurry to clean up, but quickly put on his clothes and pushed the door out. At this time, A noisy sound was echoing in the surrounding air. The explosions outside the city were short and intense, and ended after about 10 seconds, but the chaos and turmoil caused by the explosions in this beeping city had only just begun. However, fortunately, this turmoil came quickly and went quickly. Although the explosion outside the city came relatively suddenly, it was far from a real earthquake. Even the houses in the west of the city, which were closest to the epicenter, remained intact from beginning to end, and caused almost no damage except for a sprinkling of dust. The originally chaotic crowd quickly calmed down and returned to their homes under the appeasement and expulsion of the yamen runners in the vicinity. It's just that at this time, the ignorant people in the city, although temporarily calmed the chaos under the coercion of the government, the official personnel, as subordinates of the Queen Court, were not so easy to fool in beeping city. A large number of yamen runners, garrison soldiers, officials, princes and ministers, and even the privileged Tartar dignitaries, all felt a sense of unease at this time. They either climbed the city walls or rode out of the city to check the source of the chaos in various ways and through various channels. For a time, the entire capital city was inevitably a little panic-stricken and uneasy, and as time passed and the sky slowly brightened, more and more unfavorable news began to come from outside the city. And an unusual emotion was brewing in people's hearts. It wasn't until the people in the city began to go out to buy food and set up stalls that they suddenly discovered that the city gates leading to the outside world were still tightly closed, and there were a large number of soldiers guarding the area around the city gates. In the past, those Tartar masters who would wander the streets early in the morning, walking birds and fighting monkeys all day long, had also disappeared at this time. It was at this time that the people realized the seriousness of the situation, although the government was trying its best to cover up the truth of the matter. This kind of thing that happened just outside the city was of no avail, no matter how it was covered up. Instead, because of the deliberate suppression, it began to intensify under the deliberate spread of people with ulterior motives. In just half a day, most of the entire capital city, from princes and ministers to vendors and pawns, already knew the truth. The 40 to 50,000 banner troops stationed outside the city were completely wiped out overnight. This is a major event that has shocked the world, whether for the people of the capital, the Queen Court, or the entire China. You must know, how many clan soldiers have the Tartar army lost in total since they entered the pass and seized beeping city until the current little emperor ascended the throne, in the entire process of the southern and northern wars. Most of those who went to their deaths were probably the newly recruited troops after entering the pass. Now, those banner troops who stayed in the capital to deter both inside and outside the capital city are gone in one night. Now, most of the soldiers stationed around the capital city have become the Han army green camps that the Tartars usually look down upon. How can this situation allow those Tartar masters to eat and sleep in peace? Sure enough, around noon, before someone could finish a hasty meal in the restaurant, the entire beeping city was under martial law. The people were driven back to their homes, and business was suspended immediately afterwards. Teams of soldiers and yamen runners began to patrol the streets back and forth to prevent any riots and accidents from occurring. Liang Yue saw all of this in his eyes, and a sneer arose in his heart for ordinary people. The soldiers outside are more fierce than tigers and wolves, but for himself, those bold soldiers do not have much deterrence at all. However, in order not to startle the snake, Liang Yue did not act rashly at this time, but stayed at home honestly, calmed down, and continued to practice the body training boxing techniques and the golden bell cover in the yard. Soon night came. Most of the surrounding houses had already turned off their lights, and there were still sporadic soldiers patrolling the streets, but the frequency had become very sparse. Liang Yue took out the small hoe again at this time, and knocked on a floor tile in the corner of the wall for a while. After a while, he quietly disappeared into the house. Tonight, the sky seemed particularly gloomy, and a thick cloud shrouded the entire sky. After a short while, the howling north wind blew from the sky, and snowflakes began to fall sparsely in the sky above the capital city. Slowly, the snow began to gradually increase, and it was fluttering all over the sky. Bang! Pa pa pa! Biu biu biu! Just as the snow was flying, a series of abrupt sounds suddenly rang out in the city, just like the sound of firecrackers on New Year's Eve, sparse, but non-stop, breaking the night that had been gradually silent. Every once in a while, the movement would sound in different directions of growth, interspersed with light and fire explosions, as well as the shouts and screams of the crowd. For a time, the entire capital city began to become panic-stricken. Chapter 94: Panic. The night passed quickly. As usual, after soaking in the medicinal bath, Liang Yue began practicing his fist techniques. However, his practice area had now been moved from the courtyard to the newly opened basement. These were special times. Last night, Taking advantage of the darkness and heavy snow, this guy had caused a ruckus for most of the night, going back and forth, wiping out more than a dozen so-called meritorious clans. At this moment, the city of Beeping was in turmoil. The increasingly heavy snow in the sky could not dispel the noise in the air. The atmosphere in the city had inevitably become somewhat paranoid. At this time, any unusual event could become the fuse that provoked the Qing court's nerves. Therefore, although the government officials and soldiers outside were making a lot of noise, chasing so-called rebels everywhere since last night, the large residential areas inside the city appeared even quieter, especially in the area where Liang Yue lived, a large area inhabited by powerless and uninfluential lower-class people. It was almost deathly silent everywhere, and people didn't even dare to go out. The snow layer in front of the door was still intact, for fear that the officials would find them displeasing and impose an unwarranted charge on them, and then send them to prison. Liang Yue, on his side, was naturally happy to be idle, cooperating with the surrounding atmosphere and refusing to go out, secretly immersing himself in the cultivation of his skills. Liang Yue strength, 35 golden bell cover, basic, level 1-3 current level 1 inherited from Bodhidharma, the founder of Shaolin. This defensive skill has the effect of strengthening the body and enhancing the cultivator's physical defense skill effect. Defense plus 179, strength plus 5, agility plus 5, constitution plus 9, proficiency 85-100. Soon, another 2 days passed. During this period, Liang Yue's golden bell cover cultivation progressed rapidly. Unknowingly, his proficiency also showed a small step-like increase. However, this was naturally not a gift he received out of thin air. It was the harvest Liang Yue gained after sticking to the pattern of working during the night and resting during the day, and encountering a group of Jianghu figures in the process of implementing a clearing strategy in Beeping City. As a result, Liang Yue's progress in clearing out the families and sons of princes and nobles who were granted power by the Qing court was forced to slow down. No longer the grand occasion of sweeping more than a dozen families in a row on the first night. A group of imperial hounds specifically targeting martial arts figures, and the enshrined figures from various powerful families, were also ordered to patrol the night in Beeping. However, the benefits of this were also obvious. In addition to a small increase in the proficiency of the golden bell cover due to being beaten a few times, the data for the hunting mission was also boosted by this guy. Main quest, hunt imperial hounds. Manninger 118 armed Arhat 01 Western Region Demon Monk 11 Imperial Hounds 37. It seems that when I go out tonight, I should wear an extra layer of leather armor. Although those martial arts masters can't leave any marks on me, the damage is not low at all thanks to the blessing of the McGame character. When Liang Yue fought against those Imperial Hounds in the previous 2 days, although he was accidentally cut a few times, slapped twice, and hit by hidden weapons and darts, etc., the data-driven physical conditions would directly turn all the damage to him into a pile of health damage, which would not affect any of this guy's physical functions at all. And as a feature of the McWorld's laws, the loss of health would quickly recover as long as the satiety was full. This was Liang Yue's unique advantage, which was not the case for those who fought against him if they were not careful. As long as they were cut by this guy's double swords, or hit by the firearms in his hand, even if they didn't hit the vital point, they would at least end up with a bloody mess or even a serious injury. They might have to directly explain their lives there. Moreover, compared to those martial arts figures, who had limited Qinggong skills of flying over eaves and walls, Liang Yue also had a unique digging skill. Even if he was temporarily caught off guard and fell into the enemy's encirclement, this guy could still use the iron pickaxe in his hand to calmly dig a hole underground and escape, even if those Imperial Hounds still chased him relentlessly and refused to give up, wanting to play the game of digging 3 feet into the ground with him. But for Liang Yue, a mere unit of earth cube was 90 by 90 centimeters thick. Even if they hired professional tomb raiders to dig the pit, they would still have to dig for a while. Moreover, this was just a soil cube. If Liang Yue blocked them with a stone or even iron, the situation would be different. Knock knock knock. At this time, just as Liang Yue had completed a round of cultivation and was sitting in the house gobbling down his meal, the courtyard door outside was suddenly knocked to. As it hearing the sound, Liang Yue frowned subconsciously, and felt a little surprised in his heart, thinking, could it be that I was exposed? Shouldn't be, it's me, Taoist Liang. Come quickly. The government has sent people to distribute food. Hearing the voice of his landlord, the butcher, outside, and after hearing what the other party said, Liang Yue was somewhat relieved now. 3 days had passed since the destruction of the West Camp and the annihilation of the 40,000 8-banner army. During this period, Beeping City had been in a state of martial law. Some merchants were okay, At most they just couldn't do business. Anyway, the whole city was like this now, but for ordinary households, I'm afraid that a good number of people didn't have much food stored at home. The main reason was that this change came too suddenly, causing panic. In addition, it was the cold winter months, and it had been snowing all these days. In this situation, if the people's homes lacked food and firewood, it would inevitably sow the seeds of disaster. The government is now distributing food, which is also a means to stabilize people's hearts in a timely manner. Squeak a sound. Liang Yue opened the courtyard door, and the landlord's fat face immediately appeared in front of him, still as greasy as ever. How is it, Brother Liu? Did they catch the criminal? How would I know? But since the government is here to distribute food, it seems that they haven't caught him yet, Alice. This martial law will probably last for a while, so the government is distributing food now. Is it free for us? You're thinking too well. I heard from the almond runners. I know that you have to pay for it yourself. What's wrong, Taoist Liang? Are you a little short of money? It's not that bad. I still have a little travel money left. But just sitting and eating, it's not a solution. That's true. But with your skill in alchemy, Taoist Liang, how can you be short of silver? Hey, you know what? The medicine you gave me the other day, it really works. I've never felt so comfortable before. It's not like I haven't opened for business yet. Who would have thought that such a thing would happen in Beeping City? Alice, that's right. I just slaughtered a fat pig a few days ago. Who would have thought that I would run into the city being under martial law, and I'm still stuck at home and can't sell it. Fortunately, it's winter, and it's snowing, so things don't spoil easily. Otherwise, I would have lost everything. Chapter 95. Aobe returns. Interacting with a butcher landlord along the way, they soon merged with other neighbors and residents, heading towards another district closer to the city center. Subsequently, everyone lined up in a long queue next to a government office heavily guarded by soldiers, waiting to receive money to buy grain. Roughly estimated, there were at least 1,000 people around, and this was only under the circumstance that each household sent only one person looking at the line ahead and the soldiers patrolling back and forth with knives. Liang Yue subconsciously frowned, warning himself inwardly. So-called government grain distribution is indeed not that simple. It took more than an hour of waiting before it was his turn. Along with a butcher in front, however, before going to the grain store to buy grain, everyone had to undergo a body search by the soldiers, but the procedure wasn't too cumbersome. Roughly, someone would pinch your arm, back, and a few other places forcefully, and slap you a couple of times. This behavior really left the surrounding people puzzled. However, Liang Yue was very clear about this because in the past few days of night operations, he had been hit in certain vital spots by several government agents using weapons or hidden weapons. Now, these government runners and soldiers were clearly using the name of grain distribution to investigate his identity and whereabouts. If Liang Yue's situation wasn't different from ordinary people, and he hadn't already digitized himself, making him invulnerable to vital point strikes and injuries, he probably would have been found out by these people. Nice try. After successfully passing the soldiers' pat-down, Liang Yue then walked towards the sales point with a butcher landlord. After hundreds of people had made their purchases, only stale grain remained, and the carrots and beans in the baskets were clearly not fresh. Liang Yue even saw a few moldy and sprouted potatoes inside. The surrounding soldiers and officials were very indifferent to this, turning a blind eye, and the merchants in charge of selling also had an attitude of take it or leave it. Obviously, in these people's minds, as long as people don't starve to death and there's no trouble, they wouldn't even glance at you if you're eating shit. However, thanks to the private maritime trade of the late Ming dynasty, although the quality of the grain in front of him wasn't great, the varieties had become diverse. Liang Yue asked the merchant in front for a bag of decent flour, then took a basket from the side, selected a few pounds of sweet potatoes, soybeans, and peanuts, and walked back to his residence with his landlord. Before entering the house, he even asked the other party to cut off a large piece of streaky pork with alternating layers of fat and lean meat. Back in the house, Liang Yue set up his Mook-style infinite furnace again, and took out a barrel of home brewed beer from the stronghold world, planning to have a barbecue for lunch. In the following days, Liang Yue continued to live nocturnally, almost transforming into a demon in the nights of the capital, constantly taking action, constantly reaping gains. As the saying goes, the unknown is the root of fear. Facing such a hunter with an unknown identity, unknown depth, and suspected of possessing some kind of supernatural power, the Qing court was extremely troubled. In order to encircle and suppress Liang Yue, the government's lackeys racked their brains, setting up ambushes and laying down heavy traps. Various hidden weapons, poison darts, sleeping drugs, and ambushes emerged endlessly. Unfortunately, after dealing with these people for a while, Liang Yue had gradually adapted to their routines, whether it was facing the enemy head-on, weapon combat, or secretly competing, ambushes, and other tricks, as long as he had seen them as time went on. Liang Yue's coping experience continued to increase, and his methods of dealing with the enemy were sharpened by these people, improving day by day. Facing the various skills of those Jianghu figures, he learned from his mistakes, and his growth rate was simply astonishing. He tested them in person after nightfall, and during the day, he took advantage of the curfew to think about ways to break them after such a period of time. The unique methods that the government agents relied on had mostly been adapted to by him, and in the eyes of the other party, Liang Yue had begun to become increasingly difficult to deal with, and had become slippery, leaving only head-on fights as the most effective way to deal with him. The Qing court, which had originally hoped to capture Liang Yue, the so-called rebel, as soon as possible, bring him to justice, and use this to calm the negative impact caused by the destruction of the Eight-Banner Army, ultimately gained nothing. Not only did they not catch anyone, but they also caused heavy losses to the martial arts experts who had defected after entering the customs, that is, the government agents in the Jianghu's mouth. Under the multi-day curfew, the people began to complain, and the court's prestige was once again severely damaged. A large number of so-called meritorious officials, nobles, and dukes were exterminated one after another during this period, including both the Han officials who had defected and the noble forces within the Tartar clan. The court did have the intention to dispatch the army stationed outside the city to encircle and suppress, but at this time, the Eight-Banner army had already been destroyed, and the garrison troops in the city were all transferred to the periphery of the imperial city for garrison. And out of distrust of the Han army's Green Standard Army, the Qing court's vigilance against the army dominated by Han people was even greater than before. At this time, dispatching this part of the army into the city was, in their view, tantamount to inviting a wolf into the house. So, for a time, the situation was deadlocked. Later, the situation began to become more and more turbulent because, according to Liang Yue's observation, in the following days, it seemed that he was not the only one taking action in this capital. Some organizations and individuals with a goal of overthrowing the Qing dynasty and restoring the Ming dynasty had already stationed personnel in this capital secretly. Seeing that the situation in the city had suddenly changed, and that it was intensifying so, after transmitting this news to various places, they also took advantage of the situation to take action, cooperating with Liang Yue with attacks coming from all sides. The government agents were overwhelmed and could only cope with it in a tired manner. As a result, this capital city almost became a chaotic battlefield. Every night after nightfall, government soldiers, rebels, government agents, anti-Qing righteous men, and even some sporadic, daring opportunists all took the stage. Shouts, slashing sounds, hoof beats, people's cries, moans, and various struggles mixed together in the darkness intermittently. There were also explosions, arson, poisonous fog, machine guns and other modern firearms, and mysterious poison arts being staged in turn within the capital. Some unidentified people even robbed the firework and firecracker shops in the city. They ignited firecrackers and set off fireworks, and no matter who was on the opposite side, they fired wildly at the figures in the darkness, adding a dazzling touch of color to this originally noisy but dark Peiping city. Those who didn't know would have thought that Peiping was celebrating the new year in advance. However, this chaos did not last long. After another 2 or 3 days, Aobai, a senior official of the Qing court who had been leading the Eight-Banner soldiers in foreign wars, one of the 4 regents, a thorn in the side and a thorn in the flesh of various anti-Qing restorationists, and known as the #1 warrior of Manchuria, finally returned to the court after receiving news of the rebellion in the capital. Along with him were about 10,000 Manchurian Eight-Banner soldiers. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Magical Dazzle. Speaking of which, system, what exactly is this small surprise from the micro end of the ecosystem in the animal chapter? What kind of reward is it, Ling? In the initial Nick world, species were scarce. Apart from a few functional plants and animals, a complete ecosystem hadn't yet formed. The so-called micro end of the ecosystem refers to a series of areas at the microbial level. So, after completing the upgrade task for the animal chapter, various bacteria and microorganisms will be generated in the stronghold world. The host can understand it that way. After these things appear, will they have any adverse effects on me? For example, will food spoil faster or something? No, The upgrade characteristics of the Stronghold world are all aimed at evolving in a direction that benefits the host. The appearance of microorganisms, in addition to providing necessary food for certain introduced species in the Stronghold world, can also, with the host's consent, provide fermentation reactions for specific products and produce corresponding items, such as wine, cheese, etc. Please explore the specific functions yourself. Fermentation reactions, etc., didn't exist in the previous McWorld. Before, to brew wine, I had to rely on the wine barrels from Stardew Valley. However, the so-called surprise should be more than just these, right? System, I want to draw a lottery. As soon as Liang Yue's words fell, that familiar big turntable appeared in front of him. Black background, red needle. Hundreds of items were densely and evenly distributed within each selection area. Needless to say, the reason why he obtained this lottery benefit at this time was naturally not obtained out of thin air in recent times, as Liang Yue has been constantly going out day and night, wandering among the mansions of various powerful families in the capital. In addition to ruthlessly killing a bunch of Tatar nobles and Han trader lackeys, Liang Yue also took away a lot of gains from their homes and mansions, in addition to some antiques, calligraphy, paintings, books, and jewelry. Due to the needs of the Stronghold world's upgrade tasks, some rare beasts, flowers, birds, fish, and insects kept in these powerful families were naturally also given special attention by him. So, after this period of searching, the animal chapters collection task was finally completed by Liang Yue. More than 500 species groups that can reproduce and live normally have been added to the Stronghold world as a result, of course, due to some selfish reasons and collection habits. Even if Liang Yue has now completed the upper limit of species collection, if he can still encounter other species that can add glory to the Stronghold world in the future, he will naturally not be polite now. He has completely entered the role of a landlord. Collecting various materials has gradually changed from a task requirement to his personal hobby. The lottery draw is ready. Please ask the host whether to proceed with the draw immediately. Draw it now. Start. Stop. Congratulations to the host. In this lottery draw, you have won the skill Magic Emblem. This skill comes from the game world DNF. This skill is a magic combat skill that can produce magic strikes on various targets or buildings, while also increasing the corresponding attribute buff to the caster after appropriate modification by the system. This skill can automatically complete the corresponding attribute transformation according to the host's own magic attribute and produce different effects. System, are you kidding me? Knowing that I have no magic power, and I haven't even had time to unlock the ricochet skill I drew before, and now another one is coming? Speaking of which, the conditions for using this magic emblem should also require magic power, right? At this moment, Liang Yue, who was squatting alone in a dark underground passage, looked at the newly selected skill in front of him, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help twitching twice, and his forehead was covered with black lines. Unwilling, this guy immediately moved his mind and summoned his character panel. Looking at the big, unactivated, next to magic emblem in his skill information column, he was finally relieved magic emblem, using magic power as attraction. After each attack on a target, it can automatically gather out the corresponding magic emblem according to the caster's magic attribute magic value consumption. 10. The emblem defaults to having no attribute. The emblem's existence time is 30 seconds. The emblem exists in small, medium, and large sizes, with fixed attack power of 2710, 3400, and 4070. The movement speed increase rate is 1%. Buff duration is 30 seconds. The so-called magic emblem actually refers to a mutated attack mode based on magic power. Its image is a magic sphere the size of a fist depending on the magic attribute. It will also present various changing colors, causing corresponding attribute attacks on the target and amplifying its own attributes. For example, fire attribute magic power will condense a red emblem sphere, which will have burning and explosive attributes when attacking, and will produce an attribute amplification in terms of strength for the caster after the attack ends. In the original game, there are 5 different attributes: light, dark, ice, fire, and none, but now that it has been transformed by the system, the situation may become more complicated. Frankly speaking, as the core skill of the battle mage profession, the existence of the magic emblem is actually quite powerful, especially since this skill has a level 50 growth potential. It is enough to accompany him for a long growth space. Moreover, as a game skill, it will inevitably enjoy the power bonus of Liang Yue's weapons and equipment, which means that the better the equipment attributes on this guy, the greater the power of this skill. The so-called fixed attack power probably refers to the minimum attack power of this magic emblem currently. In the level 1 state, It can produce magic attack power in the range of 2000–4000 at first glance. It is indeed very bluffing. However, Liang Yue feels that these numbers themselves are not of much value, because whether its digit is large or small, it needs to be specifically determined according to the attack target. The actual damage represented by those thousands of values must not be too optimistic. Otherwise, with Liang Yue's current strength, he would definitely not be able to draw this skill. Moreover, there is no such energy as magic power in Liang Yue's body at all, and even the skill cannot be activated normally, let alone any specific application. Alice. I can only treat it like the previous ricochet, hang it there as if I have it, and take it out to bask in the sun when I have nothing to do. System, you say that if I go on like this, it's not a good thing. I can't just keep drawing skills and never be able to use them, right? Logically speaking, that magic power or something is not a big deal. It's just an ordinary energy in this myriad of worlds. Why can't I ever draw it? Why don't you just give me a backdoor? Anyway. Chapter 97 Ambushed halfway. Rumble just as Liang Yue, this fellow, was squatting there with a sly look, muttering and negotiating with the system, a burst of chaotic sounds suddenly came from far and near, gradually approaching from a certain direction above. The sound was like 10,000 horses galloping, thumping, and even the tunnel he was in began to tremble slightly as it coming. Hearing the sound, Liang Yue's originally slightly wretched face immediately turned solemn. He licked his lips subconsciously, and his eyes bloomed with excitement. Beeping City, on the wide Central Axis Avenue along with the flying dust, a group of imposing soldiers were galloping from outside the city, and in the distance, the originally closed city gate was now wide open. This team was obviously different from the usual garrison guards in the city. Almost everyone in the team had a face full of wind and dust, but it was hard to hide their ferocity and murderous aura. The entire team, about 100 or 200 people, actually stepped out with the power of thousands of troops. Leading the way was a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and a burly figure with leopard eyes and thick eyebrows, thick hair, and gray hair. Between the ups and downs of the horse's back, his eyes were like an eagle and his head like a wolf, and his face was full of majesty. This appearance was just a Jinjiang uncle version of the leopard head replica. This person is Aobai, the head of the 4 ministers of the Qin dynasty, who has made great achievements in battle throughout his life and is extremely brave. Before Liang Yue, this fellow ran rampant in the capital. This leopard head was leading the army to fight outside, suppressing folk uprisings in various parts of China. Now, he has become the pillar and backbone of a group of Tartar dignitaries and the young emperor in the court. In the eyes of most people, this Manchu general is indeed domineering and authoritarian, but after all, he has made great achievements in battle and is extremely brave. As long as he is in charge in the capital, the villains who disturb Beeping will be able to be wiped out sooner or later. To put it simply, Aobai is after all a member of their own clan. Even if he is powerful and steals power, it is only an internal affair between the Manchus at the very least. He would not slaughter the dignitaries and important ministers of the clan like those rebels. There is an essential difference between the two. In addition to Aobai, there was also a group of agile Jianghu people with different outfits following him at this moment. If Liang Yue was here at this time, he would definitely find that the 8-armed Arhat who was the only one who escaped in the Battle of Shaolin was also among the crowd. The entire team galloped forward, and soon ran through most of the Central Axis Avenue of the capital. However, the usually lively street was now a silent and desolate scene. The gatekeepers on both sides closed their doors and windows one after another, and the snow in front of the doors had not yet melted under the dual disturbance of the martial law in the capital for many days and the night activities of Liang Yue and others. The capital at this time was already a scene of panic and fear. In addition, now that the army is passing through, at this time, no one dares to walk out of the house privately and move around. It will crack. A subtle sound suddenly sounded when the team galloped past, but it was quickly drowned out by the chaotic sound of horses' hooves. Along with the sound, a stone slab that was originally only slightly higher than the ground was stepped on by a heavy hoof. This was originally a very inconspicuous sign, which was difficult for people to detect, but Aobai, who was at the forefront of the team, immediately changed his face at this moment, and a premonition of crisis suddenly rose in his heart. Although this Manchu strong man seems to have a rough and informal appearance, his military career for many years and his hundreds of battles have already trained him to have an almost instinctive sense of crisis. Warning, bold, careful, and able to perceive signs that others cannot discover from subtle phenomena. This is the basic quality of a famous general. Hey! Immediately, Aobai suddenly shouted, slapped the horse's back hard, and the whole person suddenly flew up, like a soaring vulture, soaring high into the sky. Boom! Boom boom! Bang! Immediately afterwards, just the next moment after this person took off, a series of explosions rang out one after another on the street below him. For a time, the fire soared into the sky, and the earth and rocks flew. The intense fire instantly engulfed the entire team. In the meantime, it was mixed with pieces of gray shadows that burst out, constantly flying in all directions. Those soldiers and martial arts masters who were affected by this explosion don't need to think about it, no matter what eight-armed Arhat, one-eyebrow Taoist. Under this saturated matter and firepower coverage immediately, they were blown over and over, with broken arms and legs immediately afterwards. They were beaten into sieves by the steel ball grenades that were detonated afterwards. After a short burst of screams and moans, they all turned into corpses all over the ground, without any breath of life. On the other hand, Aobai, who had foreseen the crisis in advance and took off earlier, was still seriously injured by the intense explosion and countless steel balls, and half of his armor was blurred. But at this moment, this Manchu warrior did not die because of it. It can even be said that this replica of the leopard head, except for the bloody appearance of his legs and being accidentally blinded in one eye by a small steel ball, almost all other parts of his body were intact. This skill is really moving, yo. Ao Shao Bayo is indeed worthy of being the #1 master of the Qing dynasty. You can't be killed by this. Could it be that your excellency really practiced a legendary 13 Taibao horizontal training golden bell cover to the highest level? After the explosion subsided and the dust settled, Liang Yue took the small iron pick and smashed open the bricks and stones above his head. After scanning his eyes, he quickly found the middle-aged strong man with a gloomy look on the roof of a house not far from the street. Little Taoist. You are the rebellious person who has been wreaking havoc in the capital and making the entire court uneasy. Although Aobai was seriously injured at this moment, he was far from reaching the point of being fatal. In addition, his profound external martial arts cultivation and the horizontal bones that have been honed over the years, the miserable and bloody appearance, secretly, he quickly stopped the injury. Seeing Liang Yue, who suddenly emerged from the ground at this time, Aobai's only remaining eye suddenly flashed with cold light. Staring at him intently, he clenched his iron fist, as if he still wanted to take him down on the spot. There is no need to say more about the so-called rebellious people. The situation between you and me is originally different. You die and I live. Do I care about any fame when I want to kill you? Liang Yue was leaning against the stone wall behind him at this time, holding his arms, looking at the figure diagonally above, with a sarcastic look on his face. Well said. In the midst of the arrogant laughter, Aobai's whole body was full of murderous intent. At this moment he slammed his feet hard, and the whole person suddenly swooped towards Liang Yue like an eagle falcon, with his iron hook-like claws open. Chapter 98 Chasing the Wind and the Moon. The two swords are like shadows. Facing Aobai's assassination attempt, Liang Yue didn't choose to use modern firearms to respond because he knew that even if the other party claimed to have practiced external martial arts like the 13 Taibao's horizontal training golden bell cover to the extreme, even if Aobai could achieve the legendary highest realm of external skills, shrinking his testicles into his abdomen, the opponent still wouldn't be able to maintain an unbreakable body in the face of modern firearms. The current world of the new Shaolin 5 ancestors, to put it bluntly, is just an entry-level martial arts plane, at most a little stronger than Ip Man's world of national martial arts. Think about Moninger before. Even after being assisted by various secret techniques from the western region's evil monk, and using highly poisonous substances to train a body impenetrable by knives and guns, when facing Liang Yue's sniper rifle, he was still taken down in 3 shots. Aobai in front of him might be a little stronger than Moninger in terms of martial strength, and his horizontally trained muscles and bones might be a little stronger than Moninger's poisonous shell. But what's the point? If he really faced firearms, how long could he last? As long as Liang Yue deliberately targeted him, whether it was a sniper rifle, an assault rifle, or even just a pistol, they could all kill him because the so-called horizontally trained muscles and bones without blind spots are just a pseudo-proposition in Liang Yue's mind. It's true that you can shrink your testicles into your abdomen, but can you also shrink your eyeballs in with a swoosh? Moreover, even with the eyelids, that thin layer of skin can't be trained into horizontally trained muscles, especially when Liang Yue is holding a shotgun. Even against an external martial arts master like Aobai, he would probably only need to hit the other person's head once to solve everything. Therefore, when facing Aobai's assassination attempt, Liang Yue didn't choose to fight with modern firearms, but with a flick of his sleeve. He directly took out 2 tang swords that he used to use from his storage space with a light leap, His whole body jumped nimbly out of the pit beneath him. The reason why Liang Yue chose to fight Aobai with cold weapons was to summarize the combat experience he had accumulated from fighting against the Qing court's lackeys during this period. It is true that Aobai, with his extreme level of horizontally trained external skills and hand techniques similar to the great strength eagle claw skill, is almost always invincible when facing many martial arts masters under a reckless and unreasonable close quarters fight. He can often kill his opponent in just a few moves with his extraordinary strength. He can even crush your head on the spot. Therefore, Aobai has established a notorious reputation in the martial arts world, but compared to that, Liang Yue is also not bad. He really doesn't have any profound skills or techniques. Even after obtaining the original Shaolin Golden Bell cover divine skill, his training time is too short. After all, under the circumstances of diligent practice twice a day, morning and evening, he has only barely entered the second level of the Golden Bell cover. Even if Aobai has horizontally trained muscles and bones that have been honed for many years, and even martial arts internal energy to assist him, which has almost reached the limit of martial arts training in this world, Liang Yue, with his innate advantages, also has the capital to rely on. Recently, in successive battles with martial arts masters in this plane, Liang Yue has also generally understood the level of these martial artists. Frankly speaking, those so-called martial arts masters are indeed very strong, especially their fighting skills honed over many years. If they really want to kill, they can be caught off guard, but that is only relative to ordinary people and the masses. In front of Liang Yue, it doesn't constitute an advantage. In almost 2 breaths, Aobai had already pounced down from the roof of the street. Approaching him, his hair and beard were flying, his teeth were bared, and his eyes were wide open. With a domineering aura, he struck his head with an iron claw. Before the claw hook arrived, the overflowing energy had already turned into a gust of wind, rushing towards Liang Yue's face, scrubbing his cheeks painfully, making it difficult to look directly. However, Liang Yue turned a deaf ear to this. His face was calm, and his phoenix eyes were always staring at the other party. He moved his feet lightly a few times, and met the incoming claw with a clean and neat horizontal slash. At the same time, the straight knife in his other hand stabbed towards Aobai's throat from bottom to top. Ding clang, accompanied by splashing sparks. Aobai spun and dodged, twisting his wrist, and the iron claw slapped away the incoming knife. The stabbed knife directly brushed against the other party's chest and was dodged. The initial contact between the two ended briefly with Aobai's retreat. The armor on the chest of this Manchurian first warrior was slashed open, revealing the dark golden inner armor inside. Obviously, this must be a treasure armor made of special materials. Not only did it resist his sharp blade, but even the small steel balls that had burst onto it before failed to leave any traces on it. Heavenly silkworm treasure armor, or something else? Isn't this the one that Wei Xiaobao got later? This thought flashed through Liang Yue's mind, but after fighting with the other party, he didn't stay in place for half a point, and almost immediately chased after the figure of the other party who had just landed. The double knives in his hand were like a pair of large pliers, drawing left and right, and the double knives came out together, accompanied by a sharp whistling sound. The double blades shone like a cold light, one knife horizontally cutting the other party's throat, and the other knife heavily chopping towards his knee, straightforward, without any fancy elements, relying on his strength far superior to ordinary people, and the accuracy of his moves obtained from long-term practice. Seeing this, Aobai frowned slightly, and a look of surprise flashed in his sharp, falcon-like eyes. Then, he tapped his feet, spread his arms, and his whole body suddenly flew backwards. Seeing this, Liang Yue didn't intend to give the other party any chance to breathe. He strode forward, as fast as the wind chasing the moon, and chased forward with his superb mobility. He had already caught up with Aobai's figure in just a few steps. Facing the other party's bald forehead, he raised his hand and slashed vertically. At the same time, the tang knife in his other hand posed in a parrying stance to prevent the other party's iron claws from suddenly attacking him. What a ruthless little Taoist! When Aobai saw this, a fierce look flashed on his face, and he quickly squatted down, and then his whole body spun to the side, taking the opportunity to return a sweeping leg. Liang Yue had already seen all of the other party's actions in his eyes. With his extraordinary reaction, he jumped back instantly, and his whole body retreated backwards. The tang knife originally used for parrying was swung out in a backhand, slashing at the back of the other party's head. Swish! A gray and white braid suddenly flew into the air. Chapter 99 Kill a Boy. The Tartar's signature cue, with its shaved forehead and long braid resembling a rat's tail with a coin at the end, being severed ignited a pent-up rage within Aboy. The leopard-headed warrior spread his arms wide, his entire body surged with energy, his hair stood on end, and he roared in fury. However, before his roar could last long, Liang Yue pressed forward again, the cold gleam of his tang blade flashing like a viper's tongue, stabbing fiercely towards the empty eye socket of his opponent. Seeing this, Aboy's enraged face flashed with a fierce look, and he tilted his leopard head to avoid the sharp tip of the blade. His calloused fingers grabbed the blade beside his face tightly, and with Liang Yue's strength, he couldn't pull it out for a moment. Squeak, squeak, squeak. A harsh metallic screech came from his claws and the blade at the same time. Aboy stepped forward, facing another tang blade slashing from the side by Liang Yue, and once again opened his iron claws to grab the whistling blade in his palm. Clang! In a series of rough scraping sounds, the sharp blade, accompanied by great force, completely cut into Aboy's well-honed iron palm. Instantly, blood flowed freely, bones broke, and tendons snapped, but Liang Yue's slash failed to completely sever the other's palm. Instead, Aboy twisted his wrist, enduring the piercing pain, and used his half-crippled palm to firmly fix the blade within his bones. His face twisted hideously. Baring his large yellow teeth, he glared fiercely at someone, looking as if he wanted to skin Liang Yue alive and devour him. Then, he raised his thick iron leg and kicked towards his knee joint. However, what arrived first was Liang Yue's close-quarters knee strike. A crisp crack, sound. The hard knee, carrying great force, directly and heavily struck the other's chin, like a skyward-pointing war hammer, instantly stunning Aboy, causing him to involuntarily rise into the air. The originally firm chin instantly shattered into pieces, and the thick beard did not provide any cushioning effect as a deadly move on the modern fighting stage. After suffering a heavy blow to the chin, Aboy's eyes went black, and he fell into a state of confusion and dizziness. His horizontally trained and tense body instantly lost its strength, and the hand that had been tightly gripping the blade suddenly loosened its grip. However, perhaps due to some subconscious reaction, the other blade that had cut into Aboy's palm was still firmly stuck in the other's bones. Clang! 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 Accompanied by a series of rough chopping sounds, the twin blades in Liang Yue's hand seemed to have disappeared at this moment, turning into a blur of gray shadows, carrying great force and slashing towards various vital points of Aboy's body. The reverse joint fighting technique he had previously won in the lottery was indeed a very practical combat skill, although in the current world, this guy didn't have many opportunities to practice it in actual combat. However, the human joint and vital point atlas instilled in this technique did provide him with a lot of inspiration. By analogy, when Liang Yue's twin blade slashed at his opponent, they would often unconsciously head towards the vulnerable parts of the human body: hand tendons, foot tendons, the static and arterial blood vessels inside the joints, the tendon roots of the main active parts of the human body, and so on. For a duel between experts, a moment's carelessness can often determine victory or defeat, life or death, relying on his superior physical qualities. Liang Yue could barely be considered an expert in this world of new Shaolin 5 ancestors, although he himself didn't master many profound skills or weapon techniques. When facing an enemy in battle, his so-called moves were merely pure, straightforward slashes. What he used were only the most basic cold weapon moves such as chopping, slashing, stabbing, and horizontal. But in fact, to deal with experts like Aboy, who had trained the external martial arts of transverse bone and muscle to the extreme, the most practical moves were precisely these straightforward, simple, and efficient moves. However, the prerequisite for this is that you must have a good weapon or several in your hand at the very least. It won't be broken by the opponent with a single snap, or easily twisted into a twist. Regarding this point, Liang Yue was still very confident. After all, the tang blade he was holding at this time, although it couldn't be considered a precious blade made of special materials, was still a weapon synthesized from a wooden stick and 5 units of iron ingots. In terms of raw material consumption, it was more than twice as much as the original Minecraft iron sword, but the volume of the weapon was smaller, which could be described as solid material, so naturally it was not so easy to be broken. Secondly, the person using the weapon must at least have enough power to exert the power of the weapon, and on this point, Liang Yue boasted that he was more than capable. In fact, with his current physical fitness, he felt that holding 2 tang blades was still a bit light, and wielding them was like chasing ducks with wooden poles, absolutely easy. It was precisely because he vaguely perceived the threat of Liang Yue's strange power that Aboy, who was unarmed, had been reluctant to confront him head-on in the previous confrontation. The root cause was that Aboy was a little too careless. He underestimated Liang Yue and was eager to take this guy down, but in the end, he ended up in a restrained situation. However, after his braid was cut off, The proud first warrior of Manchuria instantly fell into madness as a result. In a moment of impulsiveness, he was directly knocked down by Liang Yue, who had a better reaction. Swish, just as Liang Yue severed all the joints and tendons of a boy's body, making him lie firmly on the ground, raised the blade, and was about to end the life of this Qing dynasty general. A sharp sound suddenly came from afar, with a hint of sharp whistling, attacking his head. Hearing the sound, Liang Yue didn't even lift his eyelids at this time. He just tilted his head to the side and let the arrow pass the tang blade in his hand continue to stab down fiercely. A shattering sound of PFFT, the tip of the knife pierced directly from a boy's eye socket and penetrated the other's head. At this moment, a roar full of grief and anger suddenly came from afar. Liang Yue looked up and saw that on the opposite side of his vision, on the Central Axis Avenue, a group of agile cavalry were galloping together. The leading soldiers in front were now drawing their bows and arrows, aiming at his position. Seeing their commanding general and the spiritual symbol of the clan's first warrior being killed, this group of Tartar cavalry, who had just entered the customs for a few decades and still retained their bloodiness, instantly went into a frenzy, all with red eyes, accelerating their charge. Immediately afterwards, a rain of arrows instantly soared into the air, covering Liang Yue. Chapter 100 Vulcan Gatling. Faced with the incoming rain of arrows, Liang Yue's mind flickered, and his palm swayed erratically almost in the blink of an eye. He had piled up a stone wall nearly 3 meters high in front of him. Afterward, this fellow leaned against the stone wall, squatted down on his own, and continued to search Aobai's corpse. Liang Yue didn't have any special hatred for this Manchurian first warrior, nor did he have any reason to desecrate the corpse after his death at this time. He was simply interested in the protective armor on Aobai's body. It could defend against modern firearms and ammunition, and also protect him from swords and spears in cold weapon duels, making him invulnerable to harm. This was undoubtedly a rare treasure worthy of being called a treasure armor. Compared to the equipment in mech, it seemed to be even better. Liang Yue had discovered this point before, so when he was dueling with Aobai, his twin blades had been consciously avoiding the opponent's upper body, focusing on the head and lower limbs. With such a treasure armor, this was probably also Aobai's reliance on being invincible in pursuing and suppressing martial arts practitioners, and in marching and fighting wars. Right, just as Liang Yue was squatting on the ground, laboriously using both hands and feet to strip the spoils from the corpse in front of him, a burst of noisy shouting suddenly came from behind him. Obviously, at this time, the 8 banner cavalry troops had already galloped wildly and arrived in the vicinity. However, the explosives that Liang Yue had buried on the street were not only to destroy the 100 or so soldiers and Jianghu people that Aobai had brought into the city, but even the area 50 meters before and after the street had been destroyed by the violent explosion. A pit that was large enough to be used as a pond was now lying across Liang Yue and the cavalry behind him, so if those 8 banner soldiers wanted to come over, they had to dismount and climb the pit. For those soldiers who felt they had a deep blood feud and couldn't wait to avenge Aobai, this was undoubtedly a difficult obstacle. However, Liang Yue had the ability to turn this obstacle into an insurmountable chasm. Dingling a soft sound, a pull ring was immediately thrown to the ground by him, casually throwing the grenade in his palm forcefully behind him. Liang Yue then didn't even look at it, and continued to squirt their clumsily busy arrogant soldiers and first generals. I think its ignorance is fearless. With such a big commotion just now, no one in this huge city of Beijing, whether officials, guards, or yamen runners, dared to show their faces. You guys are good. Rushing over to Daibang, along with a dull roar, a gray shadow suddenly spread out in the air that was a dense, almost uncountable number of small steel balls, like a blood-colored dandelion blooming suddenly, with a strong penetrating force. Wherever it passed, whether it was people or horses, they were all beaten into sieves. Ugh. Clang clang clang. Puff 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 bang. After a burst of noisy screams, everything behind him began to become quiet. Whether there were any survivors or not, at this moment, no one dared to curse him from afar. After a while, Liang Yue finally took off the armless vest-style treasure armor from Aobai's body as expected. This thing was almost the same as the treasure armor he had seen in film and television works in his previous life, although the materials used could not be scrutinized for the time being. The armor itself was very light, and it was not a metal product, but a silk fabric similar to silk, heavenly silkworm silk, or some other mysterious species. This kind of silk thread is really tough enough. It seems that I have to find an opportunity to ask about it, and it would be best to introduce those silk-spinning species into the stronghold world. Slowly walking out from behind the wall, Liang Yue turned his head at this time and looked at the group of soldiers. Sure enough, under the eagerness to revenge, The group of 8 banner troops really rushed up so blindly, relying on their bloody courage. However, in the end, most of them were directly reimbursed by his steel ball grenade, and they all turned into pools of bloody sieves. Most of the remaining survivors were also affected by the scattered steel balls, and at this moment, they were all injured and fell to the ground, groaning in a low voice and in the direction of the rear city gate. There were also large groups of cavalry rushing over, but after seeing the tragic state of their own friendly forces at this time, this group of 8 banner cavalry had stopped one after another. They were standing far away on the street, at least 200 meters away, paying attention to the situation here with slight commotion. That's not a bad idea, but in the end, you still underestimated me. Looking at those people in the distance, who were standing densely packed together, thinking that they could avoid the attack of military fire by being a little farther away, Liang Yue's mouth curved slightly, and a cold smile suddenly climbed onto his face. Then, he saw him turn his sleeve, and a small stone cube appeared in his palm. After a burst of busy work, a rectangular rock fortress suddenly lay across the Central Axis Avenue. Through the deliberately left crenellations in front of him, Liang Yue once again moved his mind and took out the Vulcan Gatling gun that he had never had the chance to use since he got it. Doing with a wave of his sleeve, boxes of bullet chains that had been preloaded with bullets suddenly appeared on the side. At a rough glance, there were at least tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition. However, this was just a drop in the bucket for a rapid fire machine gun with a maximum rate of fire of 134 rounds per minute, and it could be emptied in just over 2 minutes. But there was no way. Although Liang Yue did find a Japanese self-defense force arsenal in the apocalypse world, he couldn't freely use the stronghold world at that time, relying only on the space in the storage space. The materials that could be scavenged were ultimately very limited. Being able to hoard such a batch of tens of thousands of dedicated bullets was all due to his own preference. After some simple fixing and loading, Liang Yue quickly prepared for war, aiming the cold 6-barreled muzzle at the distant group of troops, who were neatly lined up under the urging of the officers unconsciously. Liang Yue grinned at this time, and in his heart, he once again recalled the information of this rapid-fire machine gun. Effective range of 800 meters, stray bullet range of 5,000 meters, bullet initial velocity of 961 meters, error within the effective range of 0.2 to 0.8 meters. Now, these Tartar troops are about 200 meters away from me. Buzz! The swaying tongue of fire was as bright as a streamer, and in an instant, it drew out a long flame in the air. In just 1/10 of a second, it had collided with the strongest army in the world on the opposite side. Puff 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 puff. Large pieces of bodies were shattered without suspense, turning into scattered blood flowers. Limbs and broken arms were mixed together, and large plumes of blood mist rose into the sky. The flying bullets were like a swaying light whip, and after only a back and forth on the wide street, in less than 10 seconds, most of the army on the opposite side had already been shattered. Although Liang Yue was at least 200 meters away from the opposite side at this time, Liang Yue was very sure that the bloody smell had definitely not drifted over. But this fellow at this moment still couldn't hide the discomfort in his chest, and with a wide mouth, he spat on the ground. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.